Chapter 81. Chapter 81. The Great Calamity of the Ling Clan. The gigantic hand made of origin power clapped down, and sure enough, it completely suppressed Ling Dongxing and even sealed his dantian. The current Ling Dongxing was now no stronger than any ordinary person. Ha 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 ha. Cheng Wenkuan laughed loudly. He felt very well. He was extremely delighted at this long-awaited scene. From the moment he had awakened his spirit base and began his path of cultivation, he had always been compared with Ling Dongxing, but Ling Dongxing's prowess had always exceeded his own, and he could only be considered the second best. Fortunately, Ling Dongxing had never managed to break through to Gushing Spring Tier, which gave him a faint ray of hope. And now such a close rival that had always been weighing him down was actually so easily suppressed. How could he not be ecstatic at this? But at the same time, he was also extremely shocked. Gushing Spring Tier was really too powerful. Cheng Ji had just barely broken through, and Ling Dongxing was practically defenseless against him. Take all of them down. Whoever dares to resist, kill them with no exceptions. He commanded coldly, and with a wave of his hand, all the martial artists of the Cheng clan behind him charged towards the Ling clan, moving forwards in a very imposing manner. On the other hand, the Ling clan, due to the suppression of their clan head, as well as the fact that the opposing party had a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring Tier on their side, suffered a drastic decrease in their morale, so they couldn't put up any efficient resistance. There were a few clansmen in Element Gathering Tier who had attempted to flee, yet all of them were chased down by Cheng Ji, and with a palm strike, they were all beaten half to death. I never thought that the Cheng clan actually still had a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring Tier as their trump card. He should have just broken through recently, otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until now to make their comeback. The saying that every dog has its day is really true. Who would have thought that the Cheng clan would actually be able to make a gigantic comeback out of nowhere precisely when they were forced into such dire straits? According to the temperament of the clansmen of the Cheng clan, I'm afraid that no one from the Ling clan would be able to escape with their lives. Ari, the Cheng clan will be in charge of the town in the future, and our days probably wouldn't be easy after this. All of the spectators were astonished at the might of Cheng Ji, but could also not help sighing and shaking their heads. All of the people of the Cheng clan were arrogant and overbearing, and in the future where their clan was the one in charge, the townspeople would probably be having hard times ahead of them. Less than half an hour later, all of the clansmen of the Ling clan were practically taken down. There were only a mere several clansmen who had businesses outside of the Ling clan main residence that had fortunately escaped this calamity temporarily. Where is Ling Han? Cheng Ji approached Ling Dongxing, killing intent brimming in his eyes. He had commanded the others to search for Ling Han, yet the latter could not be found anywhere in the Ling clan residence. Ha 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 ha. Ling Dongxing laughed loudly. My son has already been taken as a disciple by the Huyang Academy. If you people dare to touch a single hair on his head, that would be equivalent to declaring war on the imperial family of Rain Country. Cheng Wenkuan walked over, and said, that trash son of yours entering Huyang Academy. Who are you trying to fool? Ling Dongxing spat and said, my son not only is going to enter Huyang Academy, he's also the first-place champion of this time's Da Yuan tournament. In future, he'd at least manage to break through to Spiritual Ocean Tier, so just wait. Nonsense. Cheng Wenkuan scoffed, that trash son of yours dreams of taking the first place in Da Yuan tournament. Ling Dongxing, you really like to indulge in fantasies to actually use such a hilarious story to attempt to fool us. Actually, if he had said that Ling Han was able to enter into Huyang Academy, Cheng Wenkuan would still have believed him. After all, Cheng Xiaoyuan was defeated by Ling Han, but now he's saying that Ling Han got the first place? What a gigantic joke. This time's Da Yuan tournament was the gathering place of geniuses. There were powerful warriors from the previous Da Yuan tournament like the Fourth Prince and Jin Wuji, as well as new talents like Bailey Tengyun and Xia Zhongguang. How could Ling Han be able to win? So what if he has been accepted by the Huyang Academy? As long as he has not stepped into the Huyang Academy, he cannot be considered as a disciple of Huyang Academy. Cheng Wenkuan's killing intent soared, and then he spoke to Cheng Ji, third uncle, why don't we hang them all up at the entrance to the town and wait until Ling Han, that little beast, returns, then kill all of them? Very well, we'll do that. I want to scoop out the heart and dig out the lungs of that little bastard. Ling Han, in front of him and make him also have a taste of losing his own flesh and blood. Cheng Ji Yu coldly humphed. We only need to leave about 10 plus of them alive. As for the others, kill them all. Cheng Wenkuan said deeply. Cheng Wenkuan, you dare. Ling Dongxing roared. The clansmen of the Ling clan alone numbered a few hundred, and added with their servants and guards, those that did not share their surname, the total reached over 1,000. And now only about 10 plus would be left alive, so how many people would be killed? Why do I not dare? Cheng Wenkuan laughed coldly. This was establishing the might of the Cheng clan, sacrificing the lives of the clansmen of the Ling clan to let the townspeople of Grey Cloud Town know that this would be the inevitable result when opposing their Cheng clan. Kill them, he shouted loudly. Pu, 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 one by one, their heads were chopped off with no exceptions. It was a complete bloodbath, and corpses lay everywhere. Not every clansman of the Ling clan was unafraid of death. Many of them had begged for mercy, but it was pointless. The Cheng clan was determined to wipe the Ling clan out of existence, and had absolutely no intention to accept surrender. There was only slaughter, which transformed the whole Ling clan residence into a realm of death. When Ling Dongxing watched all this happen before his eyes, he felt like it was him that was being torn apart. All of these people were his clansmen, and as the clan head, how could his heart not be bleeding at this horrific scene? But he was still more worried about his son. If Ling Han returned, what if he fell into the hands of the Cheng clan? Though Ling Han had an affable relationship with quite a few black-grade alchemists, the problem was, would the Cheng clan believe him? Moreover, the news that Ling Han had won the first-place champion of the Da Yuan tournament had not yet spread to these parts, so the Cheng clan would naturally not have any worries about attacking his son. If his son died, then even if he himself died, how could he bear to face his wife? His heart was burning with anxiety, yet there was nothing he could do. The remaining 10-plus survivors of the Ling clan were dragged to the east entrance of the town, where 10-plus short wooden pillars had been set up. Ling Dongxing and the others all had had their dantian sealed, and all of them were forced to kneel on the ground, their hands and feet tied to the wooden pillars. Woo, 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 big brother Da Xiong. Ling Zixien wept bitterly. She was one of the few survivors, yet maybe not one of the fortunate. Pa. One of the clansmen of the Cheng clan gave her a slap, and shouted, "Stop crying." Yet Ling Zixien wept even louder, enraging him, and he quickly drew the saber at his waist. Forget it, forget it. Someone persuaded him. Perhaps it was due to the fact that Ling Zixien was really too young, causing mercy to rise within him. Just let her cry as much as she likes, we can use that as a show of deterrence. This is the fate that awaits anyone who dares to oppose our Cheng clan, hee. What clan head, you're still trampled under my feet now. One of them stepped on Ling Dongxing's head. He even deliberately smeared the dirt on his shoe onto Ling Dongxing's face, causing Ling Dongxing to tremble with rage. Ha ha ha, so what if you're in the 9th layer of element gathering tier? Now even a mere 6th layer of body refining tier can easily trample on you. Ling clan is finish. Now, the Grey Cloud Town belongs to our Cheng clan. The night passed. The 10-plus remaining survivors of the Ling clan were all shivering as they suffered from the cold, so much that even ice had formed on their hair ends. Moreover, after nearly a day without any food or water, their stomachs were all rumbling with hunger. Cheng Wenkuan appeared. He wanted to see as every bit of hope slowly disappeared from the eyes of his longtime rival, and finally see as he'd be flung into absolute despair after seeing his only son die in front of his very eyes. It would only be at that moment that he would kill Ling Dongxing, and finally end the rivalry that had persisted between them for more than 30 years. Ling Dongxing, are you regretting it yet? He mocked and ridiculed. Only when he was satisfied would he leave, and the next day, he would appear again punctually to continue making fun of this former rival of his. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Ling Dongxing and the others were all left barely alive. After a whole 3 days without any food, if they had not been fed water, they would definitely have died from dehydration. But they were currently extremely weak, so much that they didn't even have the energy to curse at their captors. Report. A man raced over, half kneeling on the ground, he said, informing the clan head, "We've discovered signs of Ling Han, he's about 50 miles away from the town." Ha 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 ha. Cheng Wen Kuan was stunned for a moment, before laughing loudly. With a wave of his hand, he commanded, "Quickly go and fetch third uncle. He will soon be able to have his revenge." Chapter 82. Chapter 82. The Violent Fury of Ling Han. Ling Han raced out, and very quickly arrived at the room the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion had arranged for receiving guests. This room would usually only be used by the bigger customers of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, but because Ling Han's status was a bit unique, his visitor had also been brought here. He pushed the door open and entered, immediately asking, "What's happened at the clan?" There was a middle-aged man who had been continuously pacing to and fro inside, and when he saw Ling Han, he immediately rushed towards him like an arrow shot from a bow. "Uncle Yang Ping." Ling Han recognized his visitor. He was a member of one of the branch families of the Ling clan. "Young Master Han." Ling Yang Ping's fiery eyes immediately brimmed with tears as he spoke, his voice choking with insurmountable grief. "Our Ling clan, has been destroyed by the Cheng clan." "Cheng clan?" Ling Han said quickly. "Uncle Yang Ping, calm down first and slowly explain. What exactly happened?" Ling Yang Ping regained his composure a bit, before he once again began to speak, though his hands were still shaking. "There's an ancient monster in the Cheng clan, called Cheng Ji. Everyone said he'd already died long ago, but we never imagined that he had actually been in seclusion all this while. A few days ago, he broke through to Gushing Spring Tier. The moment he had broken through, he immediately led the Cheng clan and charged towards our clan, killing almost every member of the clan." Kwong. This news was like a bolt out of the blue. All of a sudden, Ling Han could only feel his sight darken as he very nearly passed out from such a blow. Fortunately, Liu Yutong acted in time and held on to him in support. Otherwise, he'd definitely have fallen in a dead faint onto the ground. He forcibly calmed himself and asked, "What about my father?" Clan head was apprehended by Cheng Ji and is now being tied up at the town entrance, left to suffer from the elements, baked by the sun, pounded by the rain, and freezing as the weather turns cold. Cheng Ji has declared that he would kill you in front of our clan head when you return before killing all the other survivors. Ling Yang Ping raged. "I was off on an errand out of town when this happened, and thus fortunately escaped this disaster. Once I got news of it, I immediately rushed here. Young Master Han, you must not act rashly, or you would definitely fall into the trap laid by the Cheng clan. They are currently waiting for you to come walking right into their trap." Ling Yang Ping was naturally filled with anxiety. From the moment he entered Da Yuan City, he had already heard of how Ling Han had won the first place in this year's Da Yuan tournament, defeating geniuses such as Fourth Prince and Jin Wuji. This meant that Ling Han's future was filled with unlimited possibilities. As long as he managed to survive to see the age of 30, he would definitely be able to become a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring Tier. He was of course afraid that Ling Han would act rashly. Ling Han was a young man after all, and young men were always impetuous and easily gave in to emotions. After finding out that his own father was currently being held captive, his first reaction would of course be to rescue him, without knowing that this would only cause him to lose his own life and bring a true end to the last hopes of the Ling clan. "I understand. Please don't worry, Uncle Yang Ping. I know my own limits." Once he found out his father had not died yet, Ling Han's heart calmed, yet how could he just stay there without making any move at all? Forced to kneel at the town entrance, suffering all manner of hardship due to the weather, and watched by others like some kind of show. Was this how a human being should be treated? Moreover, even if a martial artist of element gathering tier possessed a strong life force and vitality, without food and water, he would not last much longer than a normal person. The maximum amount of time he would be able to hold on for would be 5 or 6 days, and then he'd definitely die. He had to act immediately. After calling Liu Yutong to accompany him, the two of them immediately set out, rushing back to Grey Cloud Town. Gushing Spring Tier? If his opponent had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier a long time ago and possessed the battle prowess of someone in the second or third layer of Gushing Spring Tier, then he may still feel afraid. But Cheng Ji had only just broken through with his current prowess. He felt that there was no need to fear. Furthermore, the Black Tower in his Dantian afforded him a single chance to increase his cultivation level by a complete tier, allowing his cultivation level to instantly zoom up to the 4th layer of gushing spring tier. Liu Yu Tong brought Hu Niu with them, and the group of 3, riding on 2 horses, raced back toward Grey Cloud Town. However, as she did not know that Ling Han possessed a blessing from the Black Tower, she naturally informed Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan of the happenings in Grey Cloud Town. The 2 old men had been in the process of attempting to concoct the reverse pill. When he heard the news, Zhu Hixin was instantly enraged. In his heart, he considered Ling Han to be half his master, and now his master's father was suffering such humiliation at the hands of his enemies, waiting to be killed. How could he not be furious? He was not the only one furious. Zhong Wei Shan was also extremely furious. He owed Ling Han a debt of gratitude and had been troubled about being unable to repay this debt. He had immediately set out together with Zhu Hixin. These 2 black-grade alchemists immediately set off, and this piece of news, as if it had suddenly sprouted wings, spread to every corner of Da Yuan City. What? Ling Han's father has been captured by the Cheng clan, waiting to be executed together with Ling Han after the latter returns? What kind of clan is this Cheng clan? They're really too bold, aren't they? The Cheng clan is actually just a minor clan, and only recently did one of their clansmen break through to gushing spring tier. Go, go, go. Immediately make arrangements to assist Ling Han in his rescue effort. This is a wonderful opportunity. We'd be able to form a friendly relationship with a future ruler. Ha ha ha, this is really a godsend of an opportunity. With barely sacrificing anything in return, we'd be able to form a good relationship with Ling Han. Immediately form a group and follow me to Grey Cloud Town. When all the great clans of the city heard the news, they were both shocked and overjoyed. Their shock was due to the audacity and boldness of the Cheng clan, while their joy was because an excellent opportunity to form a close relationship with Ling Han had fallen into their laps. Just think, they sent their people to help Ling Han rescue his father. How big would this debt of gratitude be? Let us quickly set out, and head towards Grey Cloud Town. Any clan that had a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier immediately set out at the first available opportunity. They all wanted to be the first person to rescue Ling Dongxing from his captivity. The magnitude of such a debt would be enough for Ling Han to use his whole lifetime to repay them. Because of the panic Ling Han was experiencing, they did not stop at any moment on the journey to rest. Thankfully, their mounts were Blackfoot horses, which possessed a strand of demonic beast blood. Otherwise, normal horses would definitely have died from exhaustion on the way. After a mere half-day's journey, Grey Cloud Town had already come into sight. From afar, Ling Han could already see that there were over 10 people kneeling at the town entrance, and the one in the very middle, wasn't that just Ling Dongxing? Father! He shouted loudly, his tone filled with immeasurable rage. Ha 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 ha, this little bastard had really dared to return. Cheng Wenkuan laughed loudly, raising his right foot to step on Ling Dongxing's face, and said, "All right, I admit it now. You truly have a good son." He clearly knows that it is dangerous, but still returned to die. He of course did not mean it as a compliment. He only wanted to make things worse for Ling Dongxing. After nearly 4 days without food, Ling Dongxing's sight had become blurry from hunger, so he couldn't see Ling Han, who was some distance away from town. He only had the vague feeling that he might have heard Ling Han's voice. He opened his mouth, and in a weak voice, said, "Hannah, run. Run quickly. Don't waste your energy. He can't even hear you." Cheng Wenkuan stepped on Ling Dongxing's face, and even deliberately ground his foot in, a malevolent expression on his face. His limited patience had long been exhausted through the last few days, and he could not wait to slaughter this pair of father and son. "Old dog, you're looking for death." Ling Han urged his horse into a gallop and arrived. He leaped off his horse. Shua, his sword was drawn from its sheath, immediately sweeping towards Cheng Wenkuan. Shua, 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 5 flashes of sword chi appeared in a dance. Due to his towering rage, Ling Han actually underwent a breakthrough, and stepped into the level of having 5 flashes of sword chi. What? Cheng Wenkuan was flabbergasted. There actually appeared 5 flashes of sword chi in front of his eyes. He hurriedly put up his hands to parry the incoming blow, but Ling Han's attack was filled with his fury, so of course, he had done his very best. Added with the 5 flashes of sword chi, what magnitude of power was that? Ah! Cheng Wen-kuan released a horrible scream. Only one strike was enough to fling him away, and blood splattered from his body. Peng! He fell on the ground. He hadn't even managed to get up and a foot had descended from above, ruthlessly stepping down on his face. Cheng Wen-kuan suddenly felt as if he had charged at full speed and crashed into a boulder, as if his head would be bursting at any moment. With a KA, his nose was broken, and he had lost about 4 or 5 teeth, his face completely covered with blood. You dare to humiliate my father, I will make you experience living hell, Ling Han said in a deep voice. This time, he was really enraged. Chapter 83. Chapter 83. How do you want to die? Ta, 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 ta. The sound of racing hooves was heard, and Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan had also arrived, just moments behind them. Their arrival caused Liu Yutong to feel greatly relieved. She jumped off her own horse and began to set free Ling Dongxing and the others so that Ling Han would not have anything to worry about. Father, quick, swallow this Protect Origin pill. Ling Han took out a pill bottle, and from within, he took out a green-colored pill before feeding it to Ling Dongxing. Ling Dongxing had no special feelings about this. Since it was his son giving it to him, he'd just swallow it obediently. But Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan had both widened their eyes in shock, for this Protect Origin pill was also an alchemical pill that had been lost in the passage of time, and its effects were even better than the reverse pill. Although the reverse pill had a very powerful name, but compared to the Protect Origin pill, to put it simply, there was actually a very big gap between the two. Both these pills were yellow-grade mid-level alchemical pills, but they were very difficult to concoct. See, Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan had already obtained the complete pill formula long ago, yet had not yet concocted the reverse pill even after so many days of hard work. Yet Ling Han had now taken out a Protect Origin pill, an alchemical pill that was even more difficult to concoct. How could the two of them not be utterly astonished at this? Ling Han handed a Protect Origin pill to the remaining 10+ survivors of the Ling clan. This Protect Origin pill was the result of his efforts to improve upon the basic reverse pill, so of course, its effects were even better. Big brother Han, Da Xiong is dead. Daddy and Mommy are dead too, woo, woo woo. Ling Zixuan wept, as she lay weakly in Ling Han's arms. However, no tears fell from her eyes, for her tears had long dried up. I will avenge Da Xiong, I will avenge everyone. Ling Han lightly rubbed the little girl's back, and said, Xian, be good. Go to sleep, and when you wake up, everything will be better. The little girl nodded. After the suffering that she had experienced these 4 days, she had long reached her limits, and very soon fell asleep in Ling Han's arms. Ling Han handed the little girl over to Liu Yutong before his eyes returned to Cheng Wen-kuan, killing intent burning in them. Although Hu Niu had been tied up and bundled onto the saddle, lying on her side, as she had grown up at the side of a fierce tiger since very young, she was extremely sensitive towards killing intent. She suddenly raised her head and a hoo sound came from her mouth. She was obviously very excited. How is this possible? How could you possibly manage to form 5 flashes of sword chi? Cheng Wen-kuan got to his feet after much struggle. His nose had been flattened, one side of his mouth was bent out of shape, and his face was completely covered with blood. How do you want to die? Ling Han said in a deep voice, would you like to be torn limb from limb or dismembered, or perhaps have your head shattered? I will allow you the chance to choose your own death. Little bastard, don't you be arrogant. Even if you have formed 5 flashes of sword chi, it's useless. In front of absolute power, your only end would still be death. Cheng Wen-kuan taunted. When my third uncle arrives, all of you will die. Ling Han shook his head, and said, when I heard you say this, I really thought that I was facing a profligate, spoiled young master in his teens who only knows how to use the adults of his clan as a threat and scare tactic. Humph, when that old creature arrives, I will naturally cut off his dog head. Nonsense, Cheng Wen-kuan screamed painfully. He was once again kicked down to the ground by Ling Han. He was filled with immeasurable rage and humiliation. To have another person step on his face was the most humiliating thing in the world, and the one who had stepped on him was furthermore his sworn enemy's son, It was already enough that he could not defeat Ling Dongxing, but now even Ling Dongxing's son had the ability to step on his face. How could he bear such a thing? And at this moment, the townspeople had all come out to watch the oncoming show after hearing the news, and those who lived nearer had all arrived. When they saw Ling Han, with an awe-inspiring presence and stepping on Cheng Wenkuan's face, it was as if everyone had turned into stone. Before the appearance of Cheng Ji-yu, everyone in Grey Cloud Town had recognized Ling Dongxing and Cheng Wenkuan as the strongest elite martial artists of the town, both being in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, with no one else being a match for either of them. And now this person, who had once been recognized as the strongest of them all, was actually stepped on by Ling Han. How could any one of them believe their own eyes? Ling Han had once possessed the grand reputation of being trash of the worst quality. Many of the disciples of Grey Cloud Academy recalled the words that Liu Yutong had once spoken. After 3 months, Ling Han would become an existence that everyone could only look up to. Indeed, he was now even able to step on Cheng Wenkuan. Whom amongst them would not look up to him? But the problem now was, the strongest warrior in Grey Cloud Town was Cheng Ji-yu, an elite martial artist of Gushing Spring tier. No matter how powerful Ling Han was, how could he be more powerful than Gushing Spring tier? He's done for. Once Cheng Ji-yu arrives, Ling Han would definitely be finished. Ari, it's really too bad for a genius of his caliber. Otherwise, he may even be able to become a powerful warrior of Spiritual Ocean tier in the future. Spiritual Ocean tier. Ah, you really dare to say that? That would mean being as strong as the Da Yuan King. Think about it, Ling Han is only 17 years old now, but he is already able to step on Cheng Wenkuan like this. How scary is his talent? That's true. The spectators all murmured to each other. All of them were not optimistic about Ling Han, thinking that he had come back to surrender to his death. The formidable prowess of Gushing Spring tier was embedded deep in the bones of all of them, especially in a small town like Grey Cloud Town. For them, a warrior of Gushing Spring tier could practically be considered a god. It was at this moment that a figure flew out from the town. The figure was moving extremely fast, even the speed of a galloping horse could not match its speed. Within a mere instant, the figure had already appeared at a near distance. It was Cheng Ji-yu. Little bastard, so you are Ling Han? That evil fiend that has killed my grandson? Cheng Ji-yu's eyes were fixed upon Ling Han, his stare as intense as if he wanted to devour Ling Han. I am Ling Han, and today will be the day of your death. Ling Han replied in kind. Ha 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 ha, I am a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring tier. What ability do you have to take my life? Cheng Ji-yu did not feel in a rush to act. This was the chief culprit who had killed his grandson. He wanted to slowly torture this little bastard to death. And if we fight too? Zhu Hixing and Zhong Wei-shan both stepped forwards. And who the heck are you ye? Cheng Ji-yu was initially indifferent, but when his eyes fell upon the 2 people who had spoken, his expression suddenly changed and he gasped in shock. Gushing Spring tier. Not just Gushing Spring tier, but there were 2 of such powerful warriors in front of his eyes. What? The townspeople all gasped in shock. These 2 ordinary-looking old men were actually also powerful warriors of Gushing Spring tier? Hiss, no wonder Ling Han dared to return. So he had actually obtained the assistance of 2 such elites of Gushing Spring tier. Cheng Ji-yu's face turned serious. He no longer had any intention of underestimating these 2 men, and said, My 2 brothers, this brat has killed my grandson. No matter what benefits he has promised you, I will offer you double the amount, so please do not interfere. Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei-shan exchanged a look, before bursting into laughter simultaneously. Offer them double the amount? Who the fuck do you think you are? How many pill formulae do you have in your possession, and how much understanding do you have in the field of alchemy that you actually dare to make such an overly exaggerated promise? How dare you? Young friend Ling's problem is also our problem, Zhong Wei-shan said. Cheng, if you surrender, I can promise to beg for a bit of mercy from young friend Ling on your behalf, and grant you a swift death. Young friend Ling? Sigh. Everyone either sucked air in abruptly between their barred teeth or gasped. These 2 powerful warriors of Gushing Spring tier actually addressed Ling Han young friend, and completely appeared as if they were willing to share all of Ling Han's burdens with him. What kind of relationship was this? Fortunately, neither Zhu Hixin or Zhong Wei Shan had worn the badges that proved their alchemist identity, or these townspeople would be even more astonished, for black-grade low-level alchemists possessed an even higher status than powerful warriors of Gushing Spring tier. Must the two of you do this? Cheng Ji Yu said in a deep voice. He had just broken through to Gushing Spring tier, so his confidence level was off the charts. Moreover, he definitely did not believe that these two powerful warriors of Gushing Spring tier would go all out for Ling Han. He could not think of anything that would cause them to do such a thing. Peng, 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 peng. From a distance away, dirt and soil was flying in all directions as a group of riders was quickly making its way over. Brother Ling, I've brought my people to give you a hand. A young man jumped off his horse and said to Ling Han, raising his clasped hands in the latter's direction. His group of riders had very quickly arrived nearby. It was Bailey Teng Yun. Chapter 84. Chapter 84, Respective Arrival of Helpers. Bailey Teng Yun himself did not attract much attention, but the group of sturdy men behind him caused all the spectators to be dumbstruck. Because, embroidered on the breast of every one of them was the word, Bailey. Within the jurisdiction of Da Yuan City, there was only one party that dared to use the name Bailey as their symbol, and that was the Bailey sect. Aside from the royal house of Da Yuan, one of the four greatest parties in the area, Pu. Quite a number of people had choked in shock. Though they did not recognize Bailey Tengyun, but since this young man had the ability to take command of such a large group of disciples from Bailey sect, his status would definitely not be too low. Moreover, he actually addressed Ling Han as brother and with such familiarity, so what did this signify? That Ling Han had a very good relationship with the Bailey sect. Cheng Ji Yu's expression changed once more. No matter how confident he was, he would never presume that he had the ability to oppose the Bailey sect. The latter actually had an elite warrior of the 9th layer of Gushing Spring tier as support. Not even if there was 100 of him would he be able to oppose an opponent of such overwhelming might. His only remaining hope now was that this supposedly very powerful brat did not actually possess a very high status in Bailey sect. Hardly has one wave subsided when another rises. From afar, another bout of dust and dirt flew, and a second group of riders was very quickly making its way over. Haha, so it appears that Brother Bailey has arrived first. A young man jumped off his horse. It was Jin Wuji. He raised his clasped hands in Ling Han's direction, and said, Brother Ling, I've also brought some people from my humble clan to give you a hand. To actually dare to harm Uncle Ling, I would like to see who has such audacity. He had already dispersed the bad feelings between himself and Ling Han, so now the relationship between the two of them was quite friendly. Cheng Ji Yu could not help giving a humph, and said, And who are you, to dare talk so big? How dare you? One of the guards of the Jin clan stepped out. Have your dog's eyes gone blind? This is our clan's third young master, Jin Wuji. Pu. The townspeople had barely just regained their composure, and now suddenly there was another wave of shock and astonishment. Who was Jin Wuji? The third young master of the Jin clan, and also the most talented person amongst the younger generation of the Jin clan. He may very possibly inherit the position of clan head of the Jin clan in the future. If that was true, then, would the brother Bailey Jin Wuji spoke of just now actually be Bailey Tengyun? After all, the sect master of the Bailey sect only had a single son, and he should be about 16 or 17 years old. Hiss, two of the most powerful parties of Da Yuan City had arrived, and neither of them was represented by a minor character. One of them was the young sect master, while the other was the future clan head, and they both treated Ling Han like a brother. Were they fakes? How could that be possible? Who dared to pass themselves off as these two in Da Yuan City? Were they tired of living? Cheng Ji Yu finally revealed a most uneasy expression. Ling Han now had the protection of two ultra-powerful parties, so even if he managed to somehow get through these two great parties to take Ling Han's life, he himself would also definitely be hunted down and killed by these two great parties. All of a sudden, he was trapped in a dilemma. Should he get his revenge, or give it up? He had not yet come to the realization that the matter today would not be solved with a simple I give up from him. From the moment he had made a move towards the Ling clan, his fate was already decided, and that was death. Teng, 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 from afar, another pack of riders were very rapidly nearing. The townspeople were already numb with shock, thinking that could this be another member of one of the great powerful parties again? Ha 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 ha, Brother Jin, Brother Bailey, you two have really arrived very quickly. Amidst a bout of laughter, Li Dongyu leaped off his horse, strode over and said, Brother Ling, if you have need of our stone wolf sect, you only have to say the word. Hong, when they heard these words, all of them were struck with absolute astonishment. Though the Jin clan and the Bailey sect were indeed powerful on their own, still, they were based very far from here. The Stone Wolf sect was their real overlord. When a mere Ma Lang had come here, he was already enough to cause every one of them to feel fear and dread. And this person was actually able to treat Jin Wuji and Bailey Tengyun as brothers, so his status must definitely be above Ma Lang. Cheng Wenkuan was really about to start crying. What was going on here? Why did so many of the ultra-powerful parties appear one after another, and why were they all on Ling Han's side? Jin clan, Bailey sect, Stone Wolf sect. Any one of these parties would be able to obliterate Cheng clan 10 times over with a mere twitch of their fingers. Thank you, everyone. Wait for me to kill my enemy, and we will have a good drink together, Ling Han said, raising his clasped hands. You can help me eliminate the Cheng clan, just leave these two chief culprits to me. You can depend on us. Jin Wuji and the other two agreed straight away. Putting aside the fact that all three of their parties collaborated together, even if there was only one of them here, their might would be more than enough to easily wipe out the Cheng clan. No. 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 Cheng Wenkuan said, trembling, you can't do this, you can't do this. When you wiped out my Ling clan, why had you been so merciless then? Ling Han said in a deep voice, I have always been a very fair person. If others respect me, I will do the same. But if anyone dares to harm a single hair on the heads of my family, I will definitely return the favor 100-fold. Jin Wuji and the other two leaders, with a wave of their hand, led their groups in an advance. Without an elite warrior like Cheng Ji Yu overseeing things, what could the Cheng clan count as? Stop right there. Cheng Ji Yu shouted loudly. He would of course not simply stand by and watch as his clan is being wiped out. But he had just raised his foot when he saw Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan had simultaneously leaped out and surrounded him, one of them in front of him, while the other behind him. Ting, ting, ting. And it was at this moment that more and more people rushed over. Among them, there were minor clans of Da Yuan City as well as parties from other towns. Some even had elite martial artists of gushing spring tier in their midst. They arrived one after the other, and practically drowned Grey Cloud Town with their numbers. This was too scary. Now, aside from the royal house of the Da Yuan king, all the parties with some reputation had practically all arrived. And these people, they had all come because of Ling Han. Since when had this young master trash become so awesome? Cheng Wenkuan's face had turned ashen. Looks like Cheng clan would not be able to escape this calamity that would befall them today. He was filled with regret. Why had he not simply killed off Ling Dongxing? At least then, he would have pulled this sworn enemy of his to death with him, so he would not have a very lonely journey to the afterlife. Pa. Ling Han's foot lowered, and stepped heavily upon Cheng Wenkuan's face. Old dog, you still dare to have evil intentions even now. Ha 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 ha, so what if I die? Your Ling clan clansmen have also died with me. Cheng Wenkuan knew that he would not be able to survive, so he decided to simply throw caution to the wind, and glared furiously at Ling Han. Pa. Ling Han gave another stamp of his foot and shattered all the teeth in Cheng Wenkuan's mouth. The agony caused him to move around vigorously, yet because Ling Han was still stepping on him, he only managed to continuously flop around on the ground. Brother Ling. A tall, young man stepped out from the ranks of the others. This young man's aura swept out in terrifying ripples. It was Qi Yongyi. Greetings, fourth prince. The others all bowed in greeting. Fourth prince. The townspeople of Grey Cloud Town were all stunned for a very long moment. Finally, they came back to reality, and quickly followed the others to bow down in respect. Their thoughts were all filled with astonishment. Now, all the different parties of Da Yuan City had arrived, and they had only one reason for coming here, Ling Han. What magic did he actually possess? And in this moment, Cheng Wenkuan had dropped completely into the depths of despair. Even the royal house of Da Yuan had come because of Ling Han, so what hope was there left for the Cheng clan? Are you going to force me to go all out? Cheng Ji Yu roared loudly, his eyes wide with fury. From the looks of it, the Cheng clan would definitely be wiped out today. Therefore, he definitely had to escape and survive, so that he could find a chance in the future to kill Ling Han. Not just Ling Han, but also all the other survivors of the Ling clan. Your only path is death, Zhu Hixin said coldly. Cheng Ji Yu actually dared to harm the father of someone he thought of as half his master. The old man was also now in a towering rage. Chapter 85. Chapter 85. No more Cheng clan. Cheng Ji Yu went all out. He wanted to cut out a path of blood and return later to claim his vengeance. Theoretically, even if there were 3 of him, he would still be no match for either Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan, what more now that the 2 were working together. However, if a martial artist of gushing spring tear threw all caution away and went all out, it was still a very scary thing. Not even Zhu Hixin or Zhong Wei Shan dared to jump into a head-on clash with Cheng Ji Yu. They did not want to be dragged down together with the latter after all. Furthermore, how long could he last after throwing aside all caution? They only needed to stall him for a while, and after his burst of energy was exhausted, Cheng Ji Yu's battle prowess would naturally take a drastic drop, and by that time, it'd be extremely easy to defeat him. Little bastard, you'll definitely die. All the people in your Ling clan will die. Cheng Wenkuan called out severely. As long as Cheng Ji Yu managed to escape with his life, then the Ling clan would definitely be eliminated. Unless Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan planned to stand guard at the Ling clan residence for the rest of their lives. Noisy. Ling Han gave a cold humph, and his foot stamped down firmly. Pa, and Cheng Wenkuan's entire head was stamped into pulp. Blood spurted out in a gush, and the headless body struggled for quite some time before its movements ceased. This scene struck all the spectators speechless, as they thought that this young man really had guts of steel. Killing a man was not impossible, but the scary thing was how coldly he had done such a deed. With one stamp of his foot, Cheng Wenkuan's head was smashed into pulp, yet there was no change of expression on his face. It was just too gruesome. This brat from the Ling clan has the qualifications to become a rouletto, never be merciful towards his enemies, and kill them ruthlessly. That's right, a merciful person, no matter how talented they are, would never live very long. But when I understood that, I was already over 30 years old, and this brat from the Ling clan is currently only 17 years old. He's really impressive. Hunyo's eyes were bright. She had the instincts of a wild beast, and could keenly sense the killing intent emanating from Ling Han. She was both afraid and excited, for it was a familiar feeling to her. She wriggled around, and really wanted to pounce to Ling Han's side, but because both her arms and legs were tied up, she could only struggle around pointlessly. Though Ling Han had killed one of the culprits responsible, his rage did not decrease in the slightest. The miserable and humiliated appearance of his father and his clansmen could not be removed from his mind's eye, so his killing intent burned even more strongly. His stare fixed upon Cheng Ji Yu. This was another culprit, or it could be claimed that he's the chief culprit of this entire calamity. Because if it had not been for Cheng Ji Yu, how would the Cheng clan have dared to assault the Ling clan? He definitely must kill this fiend with his own hands. Get out of my way, he shouted loudly, and flew forward in a charge towards Cheng Ji Yu. Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan were both flabbergasted. They were about to stop Ling Han, so that he would not be embroiled in such a dangerous situation, yet Ling Han shouted, "I want to take down this old dog on my own, don't the 2 of you interfere." His countenance was determined, and did not allow either of them the chance to refuse. Zhu Hixin and Zhong Wei Shan could only step back, but they still prepared themselves. As soon as they saw Ling Han in danger, they would definitely step in and give him a hand, even if they would be rebuked by Ling Han later. Ling Han stimulated the lone wolf's blood, and his prowess, which was initially at the 8th layer of element gathering tier, was further upgraded. However, due to the fact that he had not suffered any debilitating injuries, the upgrade from lone wolf's blood was not too big, and only allowed his battle prowess to reach the peak period of the 8th layer of element gathering tier. But together with the rapid dance of 5 flashes of sword chi, and the shocking electricity sword arts, his might was still something to be feared. Yet Cheng Ji Yu did not feel a single bit of fear. Giving a light snort, he struck repeatedly with his palms, which all transformed into gigantic hands formed of origin power, striking towards Ling Han. These gigantic hands of origin power were extremely solid, and easily crushed the incoming flashes of sword chi, fully displaying the might of a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear. Gah, 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 little bastard, what you're doing now is only seeking your own death. Cheng Ji Yu was extremely pleased. He could tell that whether it was Zhu Hixin, or Zhongwei Shan, or the various parties of Da Yuan City, they had all actually come because of Ling Han. Thus, as long as he managed to take down Ling Han, he'd be able to take him hostage and escape this siege. When he was finally safe, he would of course kill Ling Han with a single palm strike and thus achieve his vengeance, and would never again return to this place in his lifetime. Humph, today will be the day of your death. Ling Han hissed, waving his sword repeatedly, the sword chi of his attacks seeming like rainbows. However, the power gap between himself and Cheng Ji Yu was still too big. With one clap of the gigantic hand formed of origin power from Cheng Ji Yu, he could feel his internal organs trembling due to the impact. But because he had already learned the ability of Body of Dead Tree, and also possessed the indestructible Heaven Scroll to help him recover his wounds, he only looked miserable. However, in truth, the repeated attacks actually helped to further stimulate the lone wolf's blood, and allowed his power to increase even further. Still, no matter how big the power upgrade was, it was impossible for his power to break through to gushing spring tear. Ling Han frowned. The space in his dantian was now abnormally big, so his ability to last in battle was something to be feared, and together with the ability of self-recovery from the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he could easily wait for Cheng Ji Yu to drive himself to death with exhaustion. But he was acting out of revenge now, and to drag this battle out for such a long time. He could not wait, and neither could Ling Dongxing. Moreover, he did not want Ling Dongxing to worry any longer about him. In this case, Ling Han's gaze steeled, and without an ounce of hesitation, he communicated with the Black Tower. He wanted to use the blessing of the Black Tower to strengthen himself, and increase his battle prowess by an entire tier. Black Tower, come, give me power. Within his dantian, the Black Tower gave a light tremble, and a mysterious power emanated from it as it started droning. This power gushed out within Ling Han's body, and increased his cultivation level at an extremely rapid rate. 5th layer of element gathering tier, 6th layer, 7th layer. Within the time for him to take a single breath, his cultivation level had broken through to gushing spring tier, and continued to further increase after that, finally stopping at the 4th layer of gushing spring tier. It had completely increased his cultivation level with a massive upgrade of a whole tier. What? Having sensed the abominable increase in power within Ling Han, Cheng Ji Yu, Zhu Hixin and Zhongwei Shan all felt as if their eyeballs were going to pop out due to this tremendous shock. How was this possible? A martial artist in the 4th layer of element gathering tier actually instantaneously increased his own cultivation level by an entire tier. He truly deserved the name of alchemy genius. Zhu Hixin and Zhongwei Shan immediately thought that Ling Han must have swallowed some kind of alchemical pill to achieve such a power upgrade, and they could not help the admiration and reverence they felt towards Ling Han's abilities as an alchemist increasing. Whether there existed such an alchemical pill in this world, the two old men did not even have a moment of doubt. They had already come to the stage that they would blindly trust Ling Han's abilities as an alchemist. Damn you! Cheng Ji Yu roared, and his palms struck repeatedly. One after another, gigantic hands of origin power came to life and headed towards Ling Han. Ling Han gave a humph, his left hand curled into a fist and flew forward in his own attack. Only his power had been upgraded to gushing spring tier, so he still could not give form to his origin power. But that was all right, the power of the 4th layer of gushing spring tier would absolutely dominate the 1st layer, so with a single punch, the green-colored gigantic hand formed of origin power instantly shattered. Ling Han had already charged forward, and with a wave of his sword, 5 flashes of sword chi flew forward. Pu. There instantly appeared 5 sword wounds on Cheng Ji Yu's chest, causing his chest to become a gory scene of blood and flesh. The wounds were so deep that even his bones and internal organs could faintly be seen. Old dog, Hand over your life. Ling Han said in a deep voice. Little bastard, you only forcibly increased your power to gushing spring tier, but how much power would you actually be able to show? I will definitely be able to kill you. Cheng Ji Yu released a furious roar. His hands moved continuously as he used the secret art of the Cheng clan, expert armed fist. Unfortunately, though he had broken through to gushing spring tier, and was now able to cultivate black-grade martial arts techniques, the problem was that the Cheng clan did not even possess yellow-grade high-level martial arts techniques. Where would they have been able to get their hands on a black-grade martial arts technique? This expert armed fist was only a yellow-grade mid-level technique, so its power was very limited. There was no way it would be able to compensate for the power gap between the first and fourth layer of gushing spring tier. Ling Han smiled coldly. If an ordinary martial artist did forcibly increase his own cultivation level by a whole tier, he would indeed be unable to control such terrifying power, because such an upgrade was too enormous. But he was different. In his last life, his cultivation level had been of heaven tier, so what could a mere fourth layer of gushing spring tier count as? Ling Han waved his sword in a powerful barrage of attacks, his sword chi seeming like rainbows, completely dominating Cheng Ji Yu. The fourth layer of gushing spring tier against the first layer, that was going to be a one-sided battle in the first place. Peng! Ling Han raised his foot and aimed a kick at Cheng Ji Yu's chest. Ka, 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 the sound of bones breaking and fracturing was heard. At least 4 of Cheng Ji Yu's ribs had broken, and his dantian was completely shattered as his body slid to right in front of Ling Dongxing. Kneel! Ling Han commanded coldly. Nonsense! Cheng Ji Yu shouted furiously. Even if he was killed, he would never lower his head in front of his enemy. You have no choice. Ling Han waved his sword. Pu, 2 splatters of blood appeared, and Cheng Ji Yu's foot tendons had been torn, and he could not help his legs from bending as he knelt down in front of Ling Dongxing. Little beast, even if I become a ghost, I will not spare you. Cheng Ji Yu spat out blood. He knew that he would definitely die today, so he did not even think of begging for mercy. His eyes were sharp as daggers as he wanted nothing more than to stab Ling Han to death with his eyes alone. Father, this person is yours. Ling Han calmed himself. He knew that Ling Dongxing wanted even more to kill this enemy with his own hands. All right. Ling Dongxing's face was filled with killing intent. He recalled how his clansmen were killed right in front of his very eyes, as if they were mere animals to be slaughtered. Their blood had painted the whole Ling clan residence red, and their bodies lay everywhere. His eyes instantly turned red, and taking the sword that Ling Han handed over to him, he immediately struck with a stab. Pu. The sharp sword stabbed right into his chest, and Cheng Ji Yu glared at Ling Dongxing with utmost unwillingness. His mouth opened and closed a few times, as if he wanted to say something, but only blood gurgled out of his mouth, his head slanted to one side, and he was dead. Ling Dongxing gave a kick to the body of Cheng Ji Yu and the corpse flew some distance away. He raised his face to the skies and released an enraged roar. From today onwards, there would be no more Cheng clan in Grey Cloud Town. Chapter 86. Chapter 86, Liu Yu Tong breaks through. Under the siege and assault of so many different parties, how could the Cheng clan resist? They were instantly wiped out. Perhaps there may be a few who have fortunately escaped, but with Ling Han's current status in Yuan City, the survivors of the Cheng clan would be ultimately detested by all. They'd have to keep running and hiding, or they'd definitely be apprehended and delivered straight to the Ling clan. Who did not want to befriend Ling Han? There were not many members of the previously flourishing Ling clan who survived. Thus, Qi Yongyi and the others did not leave immediately after eliminating the Cheng clan. They left behind their people to assist the Ling clan in taking control of the situation. But after such a battle, most likely no other party within the jurisdiction of the Yuan City would dare to make an enemy of the Ling clan. Previously, more than 100 different parties of varying power and might came to Ling Han's aid, so who would not be terrified of seeing a repeat of this scene? All the properties of the Cheng clan naturally fell into the ownership of the Ling clan. However, because the Cheng clan had long been forced into economically dire straits, they were actually almost destitute. However, their minerals still existed, and so did their shop lots. With proper management, these properties would definitely be able to generate a massive income for the Ling clan. After staying at the Ling clan residence for about a day, Qi Yongyi and the others excused themselves and departed. They were about to set off towards Huyang Academy, and since Ling Han would be going to the same place very soon, they did not depart with heavy hearts. After all, they'd be able to see each other again in a few days' time. Meanwhile, Liu Yutong entered seclusion in preparation to break through to Gushing Spring Tier, for she felt that she was really too useless. At a time when Ling Han needed his little female attendant the most, she couldn't even do anything to help him, causing her to feel very dissatisfied with her current ability. Thus, as soon as the danger was over, she immediately began the process of breaking through. Ling Han also needed to stay for a while longer to help take care of some of the clan matters, so he decided to wait until Liu Yutong had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier before taking Ling Zixian and Hu Niu with them to Huyang Academy. The first item on the agenda was naturally the funerals of the clansmen of the Ling clan. Too many people had died, merely the funerals alone took 7 days. Moreover, because too many of their clansmen had died, there was a need to replenish their manpower by a massive amount, or it would not be possible to manage so many different properties. Ling Han was not of much help. He was an expert in alchemy and martial arts, but in such matters, he was completely inexperienced. Thankfully, Qi Yongyi and the others left behind many of their own people to assist, and had promised that they would wait until the Ling clan recovered before calling those people back. In the meantime, Chen Fenglai came once, bringing some news to Ling Han. Chen Pengju had indeed had a slip of the tongue after drinking too much, and the incident of Hang Zhon's murder was known by someone else. That person, after much hesitation, finally decided to go to Stone Wolf sect to tell this secret so that he'd be able to gain some benefits. Who knew that he actually encountered Chen Fenglai, and after Chen Fenglai discovered the whole story, he immediately killed the man to keep him from divulging the secret. Chen Fenglai had come deliberately to express his good faith. The current Chen Fenglai no longer dared to have any thoughts of betraying Ling Han. How many parties stood behind Ling Han? Unless Chen Fenglai had lost his senses, otherwise he would not dare to make trouble. Thus, Ling Han gave him the complete medicine formula to resolve his state of madness as a reward. On the 9th day, an extremely powerful wave of power swept out from the inner courtyard of the Ling clan residence, and the terrifying pressure caused many elite martial artists of Gushing Spring Tier to feel as if their hearts and souls were pounding. Liu Yutong had broken through. Ling Han had been sitting in the middle of the courtyard in the midst of cultivation when a shapely figure flew towards him before stopping at his side. It was Liu Yutong. Not bad, 8 days and you've broken through, your talent is truly not bad. Ling Han smiled and nodded. Though he had previously given Liu Yutong much valuable experience in battle, but to be able to break through completely within a mere 8 days, Liu Yutong's talent in the field of martial arts was indeed extremely high. Liu Yutong nodded, and in a firm voice, she said, "In the future, I will definitely not become your burden. Instead, I will be a helper you can depend on." "Haha, I believe you," Ling Han said with a laugh. After some thought, he said, "Since you've broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, then I'll teach you the 3rd level of cultivation technique of the 3 yin mysterious arts. Once you've mastered that, you will never need to worry about falling unconscious again." Liu Yutong nodded, appearing slightly excited. This was a heaven-grade cultivation technique, and for a martial arts maniac like herself, it was an irresistible temptation. The two of them returned to the inner chambers, and Ling Han naturally again underwent a test of his own while he had been guiding her in the cultivation technique, causing his emotions to ripple continuously. This young girl was indeed a demon. After much difficulty, he finally finished guiding her in the cultivation technique. Ling Han once again stepped out and continued to sit cross-legged in the courtyard. Previously, the Black Tower allowed him to temporarily obtain the power of Gushing Spring Tier, but it only lasted for 1 hour. And the next time he wanted to make use of the power of the Black Tower again, he would have to wait until he has successfully broken through to Gushing Spring Tier. However, when he has finally broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, he'd be able to gain a preliminary understanding of the secrets behind the Black Tower. He had no idea what kind of surprises awaited him then. Additionally, Ling Han had also achieved the 5th layer of element gathering tier by now. The reason why he had been able to break through so quickly had been because after the blessing of the Black Tower had been used up, though the power he gained very quickly disappeared, it seemed as if a small portion of it had been left within his body. After a few days of digestion, this power now belonged completely to him alone. Initially, he had only required about a month to complete accumulating enough energy to break through to the next layer, but now that he had obtained such benefits, naturally everything went smoothly, and as to be expected, he had successfully broken through. With the stimulation of the 5 elements origin nuclei, his power would soar to the 9th layer of element gathering tier. If he fought with Qi Yongyi again now, he should be able to achieve an absolute victory. My current battle prowess should be about 14 stars, right? Ling Han mumbled to himself. In the field of martial arts, there were many geniuses who could disregard the gap between their own cultivation level and their opponent to challenge someone much stronger than them. Their actual battle prowess did not correspond to their actual cultivation level, and so cultivation level was completely unable to measure the battle prowess of a genius. As a result, the world of martial arts possessed a different way to measure battle prowess, named as battle stars. For example, if a genius whose actual cultivation level was only 4th layer of element gathering tier was able to battle evenly with an opponent of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, his battle prowess would be 6 stars. Within the 9th layer of element gathering tier, Li Dongyu's battle prowess was the weakest, so he only had 10 stars. Jin Wuji should have 11 stars, and Qi Yongyi, due to using the Son of Heaven fist technique together with 3 flashes of fist qi, should be able to reach 13 stars, Ling Han thought. However, there were too many variables that could affect battle prowess. For example, if Bailey Teng Yun wielded the Staff of Destruction, his battle prowess would be enough to soar to 11 stars, but without this staff, his battle prowess would only be about 9 stars. He wouldn't even be able to match Li Dongyu. Some people were the emotional type. Under great rage, or after drinking too much, their battle prowess would shoot up. As a result, while cultivation levels did not change, battle stars were a variable. Only a real-time situation would be able to reveal how many stars would someone reach at their best. In my last life, although my cultivation level was the peak period of Heaven tier, my battle prowess should be only about 9 stars, or 10 stars at most. I wonder what level could those freaks have reached? Ling Han shook his head. In his last life, he had spent his time either continuously concocting alchemical pills, or secluding himself to break through to the next cultivation level. Even when he had reached the highest he could go in terms of cultivation level, he still did not seek out the other 6 powerful warriors of Heaven tier for a serious spar. When he recalled that, he could not help feeling a bit regretful. And it was at this moment that the sound of a commotion was heard from outside. It quickly transmitted over to the inner court where he was, and became closer and closer. Peng, after only a short while, the commotion had spread to this courtyard. The door was heavily kicked open, and a tall, slender young man entered. This person had an imposing appearance. He was dressed in embroidered clothing, a sword hanging from his waist. His expression was one of extreme arrogance, as if he wanted nothing more than to have his nostrils facing the heavens, making it seem as if coming here had been an exercise of utmost humility for him. Behind him followed a group of servants of the Ling clan. They were all underlings Qi Yongyi, and the others had left behind to serve Ling Han. All of them were covered in dirt, as if they had just been beaten up. Some even had their arms broken. This one had not come with good intentions. Chapter 87. Chapter 87, Hu Bo. This young man was, in gushing spring tier. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. This person appeared to be only about 23 or 24 years old, yet he had already stepped into gushing spring tier, and had even reached the peak period of the 1st layer. In Rain Country, this kind of person would definitely be considered a genius. Could this be Feng Yang? In the area of Da Yuan City's control, if you were to ask what enemies he had, then it could only be Feng Luo, who had suffered losses twice by his hand. Could that guy have asked his brother to come back? No, according to rumors, Feng Yang was already in the 3rd layer of gushing spring tier. However, this person was really too tyrannical. He had obviously forced his way here, and when someone dared to stop him, he actually acted to wound them. Young Master Han, this person said he wanted to see Miss Liu, and forced his way through. Some of us tried to stop him, yet were killed by him in their attempt. One of the attendants following behind this young man immediately said to Ling Han, his face filled with grief. Ling Han could not help his anger from rising. Barging his way through was already arrogant enough, actually dared to kill. This guy, just because he was in gushing spring tier, was actually lawless to such a point. Go, I command you to invite Yu Tong out here. This young man said to Ling Han as if he were ordering around a servant. Ling Han looked at him and said in a deep voice, "You killed my people. So what? They are only lowly dogs, so what if 1,000 or 10,000 die?" The young man said indifferently, instantly causing the others to be filled with righteous indignation, wanting nothing more than to kill this guy 100 times if they could with their sharp gazes alone. Ling Han gave a humph and said, "In my eyes, you're lower than even a dog." The young man was stunned for a moment before laughing loudly, and said, "A mere martial artist in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, and you actually dare to insult me? Ha 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 ha, you probably don't know who Bo, right? I don't care who you are." Ling Han had already leaped forwards, and with a ding, his sword had left its sheath. The sword flew forward, as quick as lightning. "How dare you?" The young man who had proclaimed himself Hu Bo instantly revealed a furious expression. His right hand opened up and origin power formed a golden palm, intending to grab hold of Ling Han's sword. Ling Han's right hand moved, and 5 flashes of sword chi appeared together. Shua, 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 6 sword images slashed as one, and the large hand formed from origin power was instantly sliced into pieces. Ling Han pushed forward, his sword aiming directly for Hu Bo's throat. 5 flashes of sword chi. Hu Bo could not help releasing a surprised gasp. He once again struck forward with a palm, and another large hand of origin power blasted forward, halting Ling Han's further advance. He could not help a cold smile turning up the corners of his lips, and said, "I never thought that a tiny place like Grey Cloud Town could actually produce a genius that managed to form 5 flashes of sword chi. Moreover, you are obviously only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, yet the prowess you've shown can be compared to the 9th layer. You should have about 13 battle stars, right?" What battle stars? Those people who had followed in were all at a loss. They had never heard such a phrase before. But in front of me, no matter how many battle stars you have, it is completely useless. Hu Bo shook his head. The gap between cultivation levels is too big. If I did fight with my full power, I'd be able to kill you in one move. He paused for a moment, then said, "I treasure talent, so I will give you an opportunity to live. As long as you become my underling, I not only will spare you, I'll even be able to give you ultimate godly techniques." If Liu Yu Tong had been able to hear this, she'd definitely laugh her head off. Who was Ling Han? Someone who could casually take out a heaven-grade cultivation technique. So, what kind of cultivation technique did you plan to give him that deserved to be called ultimate godly techniques? Kneel down and accept your death, and I can give you a swift end. Ling Han replied back. Hu Bo was enraged, and said, "Brat, being arrogant just because you're a little bit talented is not a good habit. Since you deliberately seek your own death, then let me help you." This time, he made the first move. As his hands moved, his attacks swept out in waves, and his battle prowess had improved to a whole new level as compared to previously. However, it was still only an increase of 1 star. Of course, this star was applicable only to gushing spring tier. Ling Han was not afraid. Indeed, his battle prowess was not able to reach the level of gushing spring tier, but his defense was awesome. The body of dead tree allowed him to withstand tremendously powerful attacks repeatedly without suffering any injury, and the indestructible heaven scroll allowed him to instantaneously recover whatever wounds he did suffer. It was enough to qualify him for this battle. The 2 martial artists clashed, and flashes of sword chi soared to the heavens, origin power gushing all over the place. This can't be. Young Master Han was actually so powerful. He can actually fight on even grounds with a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier. What does this count as? Didn't young Master Han just slaughter one a few days ago? But that old guy had just broken through, so he definitely couldn't have been as powerful as this one. Murmurs rose up among the crowd, and they were all flabbergasted at Ling Han's might. He was undoubtedly only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, yet could actually fight on even grounds with a person in Gushing Spring tier. This was practically unbelievable. However, Gushing Spring tier was still Gushing Spring tier, after all. After a couple of exchanges of blows, blood not only stained the corners of Ling Han's mouth, the skin all over his body had also cracked, dripping blood. And this was because he had learnt the body of dead tree ability. Otherwise, suffering such a bout of assault, even his bones would long have been shattered. Facing such a scene, the others could only feel a deep sense of admiration and reverence. This was the gap of a whole tier, yet Ling Han could still manage to fight until such a point. If the two fighters had the same cultivation level, then Ling Han most likely would have been able to kill his opponent in one move. Ling Han's condition was not as bad as it looked. With the circulation of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, the wounds that he had suffered were actually recovering very quickly. His battle prowess not only did not weaken, it became even stronger with the use of the lone wolf's blood. After such a long battle, he had also obtained a rough grasp of his opponent's attacks. Every secret behind his opponent's moves was practically revealed to him. Xiao, his sword suddenly shot forward and 5 flashes of sword chi moved unhindered, as if it was the writing brush of a god, aiming straight for Hu Bo's chest. Hu Bo was extremely shocked. Although all of his moves had their own weaknesses, but how could they have been seen through by a mere martial artist of element gathering tier? But that was exactly the truth of what happened. This slash from Ling Han aimed straight at his weak point, and was heading towards him. In a moment of desperation, he could only raise his hands and place them in a block in front of his chest. Pu. A spurt of blood sprayed. A wound had appeared on his right palm, and blood was pouring from it. The two fighters had been fighting so long, and finally Ling Han managed to score a hit on his opponent. Hua! The people around them exploded with shocked exclamations, obviously extremely excited. Although Hu Bo had only suffered a single injury, and experienced a little bit of loss, but the crucial point was that he was in Gushing Spring tier. A martial artist at the grand level of Gushing Spring tier was actually successfully wounded by a martial artist in element gathering tier. No matter where this happened, it would be seen as a feat of impressive heights. Hu Bo's face was twisted into a malevolent expression. This stab had not harmed him much, and he had only bled a little, so it was not a serious injury. Yet his hatred for Ling Han had reached astronomical levels. A mere commoner from such a desolate place, and he actually dared to harm him, a member of one of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, the 7th young master of the Hu clan. If such a piece of news were to spread out, how would he be able to continue facing his circle of friends? Additionally, wasn't this young man's talent too scary? If he really did grow to Gushing Spring tier, how strong would he be? He could not allow Ling Han to live. Hu Bo had developed a serious intention to kill Ling Han. Previously, even if he had really meant to kill Ling Han, that was the same as a human being casually killing a bug. It was not something that would be considered seriously. But now he really intended to kill Ling Han and put his all into the effort. He slowly drew his sword, and said, "You do have some ability, but this is as far as you can go." Because he was in Gushing Spring tier, he was able to use black-grade martial arts techniques. Chapter 88. Chapter 88. Becoming Enemies. Hu Bo's hand held his drawn sword. His status was a noble one. He was in the uppermost social class below the imperial family of Rain Country, yet had now actually suffered an injury from someone else. This had inflicted a heavy blow on his self-esteem, and there was no way his ego could accept such a thing happening, so his desire to erase this future ruler increased even further. 5 flashes of sword chi, that could be considered a strong enough existence among rulers. "You will not be able to kill me today, nor will you be able to do so in the future. You will only die by my hand," Ling Han said deeply. From the moment Hu Bo had committed murder within the grounds of the Ling clan residence, that already meant this man's fate was sealed. Not even the gods would be able to change his fate. Because this was a man he intended to kill. "Hu Bo, what are you doing here?" Xiao, a figure flashed into the vicinity, and Liu Yutong had appeared. She had been in the midst of analyzing the 3rd level of cultivation technique from the 3 yin mysterious arts, But hearing the commotion outside becoming louder, she immediately realized that something was not right, and thus immediately leaped out. Her beautiful face was filled with anger, and because she saw that Ling Han was covered with blood, her heart could not help tightening as a powerful killing intent immediately rose to life within her. Anyone who dared to injure Ling Han, they were all unforgivable. However, this Hu Bo was the seventh young master of the Hu clan, and was of the same social status as herself. Moreover, he was even stronger than her, so she could not act rashly, or she could possibly cause Ling Han's death. This was something she was even more unwilling to see. Yu Tong. Hu Bo immediately restrained his killing intent, smiled and said, "Your trip this time took quite a few months. I was very worried about you, so I deliberately came over to escort you back. I don't need you to meddle in my affairs." Liu Yu Tong said coldly. She pointed at the door and said, "You can get lost now. Yu Tong, it can't be that you've fallen in love with this brat, right?" Hu Bo's gaze swept over to Ling Han, uncontrollable jealousy brimming in them. "Then, this brat is definitely going to die. You dare to take one more step." Liu Yu Tong slanted her body to stand in front of Ling Han, an icy expression on her beautiful face. It can't be that you've really been captivated by him." Hu Bo was about to be driven mad with rage. He and Liu Yu Tong were both members of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, and in order not to be pushed around easily by the imperial family, it was common for the 8 great clans to ally with each other through marriage. After Liu Yu Tong was discovered to possess such powerful talent in the field of martial arts, the members of the other 7 great clans all started brimming with desire to have her marry into their respective clans, and Hu Bo was one of her many admirers and pursuers. And, personally, he was very satisfied, because not only did Liu Yu Tong possess a terrifying talent in martial arts, she was also one of the twin stunning pearls of the imperial city. What man would not want to marry her? But he had never imagined that she had just stepped out for a short while, and her heart and soul was captured by a wild brat. A mere country bumpkin. "I want to kill him. I want to kill this little bastard." He roared with rage, and with one leap, pounced towards Ling Han. "How dare you!" Liu Yu Tong stepped forward to parry. Hong, the aura of gushing spring tear exploded. "Yi!" Hu Bo gasped in shock, a surprised expression on his face. "Gushing spring tear. You've broken through to gushing spring tear." There was no way he wouldn't be surprised. Although it was common knowledge that Liu Yu Tong was extremely talented in the field of martial arts, but no matter how talented she was, she should have only been able to break through to gushing spring tear after she has passed 20 years old. Moreover, a few months ago Liu Yu Tong had only been in the 8th layer of element gathering tier, so theoretically, it would already have been difficult enough for her to reach the peak period of the 9th layer of gushing spring tear by now. And to break through to gushing spring tear, she should at least have needed another 1 or 2 years to settle. Though power could be forcibly increased with the aid of alchemical pills, it was impossible to fake one's aura. This was definitely the aura of gushing spring tear, and from the feel of it, she had just broken through quite recently. Genius. She really was a genius. "Yu Tong, I've blamed you wrongly," he quickly said. Being able to break through to gushing spring tear in such a short period of time, how could Liu Yu Tong have any spare time to get into a romantic relationship? She must have gotten some kind of fateful encounter here, and had been putting all her efforts into breaking through. This must be the reason why she had been staying here for such a long period of time. "Get lost." Liu Yu Tong ignored his words, her palms moved, and a terrifying offensive power rose up. The symbol of gushing spring tear was origin power given form. With the claps of her palms, one after another, giant hands of origin power were formed, flying towards Hu Bo. And because Hu Bo felt that he was in the wrong, he did not dare to parry her attacks. He only kept dodging while pleading for mercy. But because he was at the peak period of the 1st layer of gushing spring tear, he was much more powerful than Liu Yu Tong. Moreover, Liu Yu Tong had just broken through, so there was no way she would be used to using the increased power that she possessed now, and he very easily dodged her attacks. And more importantly, though gushing spring tear allowed the martial artist to learn black-grade martial arts techniques, Liu Yu Tong had just broken through, so how would she have had the time to cultivate any? So she was even less of a threat to Hu Bo. "Yu Tong, calm down. I'll leave." All right? When you return to the imperial city, I'll look for you again. Hu Bo retreated, but before he left, he gave a cold glare to Ling Han and said, "Brat, don't think that just because you're close to her, you're favored. Yu Tong is not someone you can have delusions about. If you dare, I will definitely tear you to pieces." Without waiting for Liu Yutong's reaction, his figure took a great leap, and he had already disappeared to a far-off distance. Liu Yutong chased after him for a few steps but then gave up. Hu Bo was much faster than her. "I'm sorry." She raced back to Ling Han's side and said with deep remorse. Hu Bo had come to the Ling clan residence and killed so many people, yet she was unable to apprehend him. "You don't have to apologize, that guy belongs to me." Ling Han humphed coldly. The current him indeed did not yet possess the ability to kill Hu Bo, but it would definitely not be too much of a weight. Liu Yutong knew that Ling Han was a man who kept his word, so she quickly said, "The Hu clan is one of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, and their power is at the same level as our Liu clan. They also possess a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier as support. You definitely must not act rashly." Ling Han had already guessed that Hu Bo must have an exceptionally high social status. Otherwise, he would not have been qualified to pursue Liu Yutong. He nodded, and said, "Am I the rash type of person?" Liu Yutong could not help but observe a moment of silence in tribute of the Hu clan. Although Ling Han was currently only an element-gathering tier, his talent in martial arts was higher than her own by 100-fold. And together with his achievements in the field of alchemy, the Hu clan have gained a powerful enemy this time. Though there were still 1,000 things left to do at the Ling clan, Ling Dongxing still forced Ling Han out of the Ling clan residence, commanding him to immediately set off to report at the Hu Yang Academy. After a moment of consideration, Ling Han realized that his staying here wouldn't help anything anyways, so he might as well set out. He and Liu Yutong brought Ling Zixian and Hu Niu with them. However, because Ling Zixian's parents had both died in the Great Slaughter previously, Ling Han still had to look for someone to take care of these 2 little girls after they had reached the imperial city. Now, Hu Niu had slowly gotten accustomed to eating cooked meat, but she was still only interested in eating meat. She wouldn't even touch any kind of vegetable. But she was now exceptionally clingy towards Ling Han. Whenever there was time, she would lean against him like a kitten, resting her little head on his knee. Don't think that she had put away her wild nature though, because to other people, she was still extremely ferocious. But because of Ling Han, she had also become slightly closer to Liu Yutong and Ling Zixian. Or at least, she would not try to bite the 2 of them anymore. And, Ling Han realized to his extreme shock that this wild little girl never seemed to be able to get full. No matter how much food they gave her, she would be able to easily consume it all. And after she had eaten some demonic beast meat, there actually appeared a spike in her cultivation level, and she quickly stepped into the 4th layer of body refining tier. She had obviously not awakened her spirit base yet, and she had never learnt any kind of cultivation technique before. This caused Ling Han a great shock. Power would not simply appear without reason. For example, the origin power within the body of a martial artist had come from refining the spiritual qi around him. And Hu Niu did not practice any kind of cultivation, so her power had obviously not come through this channel. Then, it must have come from the food that she had eaten. Could this little girl be able to directly refine the food she ate into her own origin power? When this deduction arose in his mind, Ling Han could not help feeling astonished. What kind of terrifying ability was that? In order to prove the truth of this deduction, Ling Han and Liu Yutong kept hunting down demonic beasts for Hu Niu to eat her fill. Indeed, the more she ate, the faster her power grew. But there was a limit to it, because her stomach was not a bottomless pit after all. By the time the 4 of them reached the imperial city, Hu Niu was shockingly already in the 6th layer of body refining tier. This was not as terrifying as Ling Han's own pace of cultivation, but it was enough of a great shock, because even now, she had not yet awakened her spirit base. Ling Han had a feeling that he had picked up a valuable treasure. Chapter 89. Chapter 89, Old Demon. After so many days, Hu Niu finally managed to learn a few words somehow. The word that she spoke the most was meat, and then it was kill, and also Ling Han. She only managed to learn these 3 phrases, which brought the total of her vocabulary up to only 4 words. But, at least she now knew that Hunyo was her name, and would raise her head in response when she heard it. She still did not like to walk on 2 legs, but Ling Han had a large influence on her, causing her to unknowingly imitate his actions. By the time the 4 of them reached the imperial city, the wild little girl finally got used to walking on her legs. But when there was no one else, she would still be walking around on all 4s. And she was extremely fast, as if she was a fierce tiger that had finally escaped its cage. Her dislike for wearing clothes did not change though. A new suit of clothes, after only a mere few days, would be torn to shreds by her hands, causing Ling Han and Liu Yutong to feel very exasperated, though Ling Zixian was extremely envious of this, because Hunyo would be able to frequently get new clothes. Entering the city actually required an entrance fee of a silver coin. Since there were 4 of them, they had to pay 4 silver coins. Though this was a paltry sum to Ling Han, but taking into consideration how many travelers entered and exited this city every day, the money that came merely from collecting entrance fees would definitely be an incredible wealth. It was indeed a good life being the emperor. I built this road, so if you want to enter, you'll have to pay. It was completely fair. After the 4 of them entered the city, it happened to be noon, so they decided to find some place to have lunch first before going to report at the Huyang Academy. Meat. 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 Hunyo sat down very earnestly, drool already starting to drip from her mouth. Ling Han did not look at the menu, and simply said to the waiter, "Just serve whatever's good, but there must be a lot of meat." "All right," the waiter replied before leaving. There were not many customers in the restaurant in the beginning, but as dish after dish of delicious food was served to their table, it was also soon nearing the time when majority of people would be having their meals. The number of customers in the restaurant gradually increased, making the atmosphere increasingly livelier. Hunyo did not bother with using any chopsticks. She would simply reach out and grab onto a whole chicken or duck, and within a few moments, she would have completely devoured it. She really had a terrifyingly good appetite. "Aren't you scared of getting your hands dirty?" Ling Han shook his head. He had taught her who knew how many times, yet this wild little girl kept resenting the use of chopsticks because they were too troublesome to use. Hunyo only gave a giggle in response before continuing to devour the food in front of her. Compared to her, Ling Zixian was much more refined. She would only take small bites, and when she smiled, there would be no sign of her teeth. She had already learnt the basic demeanor of a daughter from a noble house. "What a good-looking young girl," an elderly voice was heard, causing both Ling Han and Liu Yutong to turn their heads to look at the speaker. It was an old man who seemed to be in his 60s. He was dressed in rich robes, and out of the 10 fingers on his hands, there were rings on 8 of them. He was obviously extremely wealthy. His eyes were focused entirely on Hunyo and Ling Zixian. His stare was so intense that it seemed as if light could be seen from his eyes alone. "Are the 2 of you the parents of these 2 little girls?" the old man asked as he walked over, but he immediately introduced himself afterward. "I am Chen Yun Xiong, the shopkeeper of the 4 Seas business. I am quite well known." Liu Yutong shook her head, while Ling Han glanced a moment at this Chen Yun Xiong, and said, "We are not their parents, just their relatives." Ling Zixian very obediently smiled at the old man, and addressed him as grandpa, while Hunyo only continued to think about eating. In her eyes, nothing was more important than eating meat. Chen Yun Xiong seemed as if he liked these 2 little girls very much. He continued to babble on, causing Ling Zixian to break out continuously in laughter, while Hunyo acted as if she hadn't heard him speak at all. At first, Ling Han only thought that this old man was especially fond of children, and so did not think too much about it. But the old man's gaze became increasingly odd, as if he was a wolf that had focused its eyes on 2 lambs. His eyes were so verdant that they were almost lit up, and Ling Han finally realized that they had encountered an old lecher, and this old lecher's favorite target was little girls. "Come, let Grandpa take a look at your palm lines." Chen Yun Xiong could not hold himself back from stretching out a hand to catch hold of Ling Zixian's little hand, revealing his true colors of a lecherous molester. "Pa." Ling Han reached out and caught hold of the old man's wrist, his gaze severe as he said, "Old guy, you're already so old, and yet you're still unwilling to behave." Chen Yun Xiong was not a martial artist, and as he was gripped by Ling Han's hand, he suddenly wailed from the pain of such a tight grasp. He only stopped when Ling Han flung him away, causing him to stumble and fall onto the ground. Raising his hand for a look, there shockingly appeared 4 finger marks on his wrist. They were so green that it looked like they were going to darken into a bruise soon. His expression had also darkened as he gained a new fear in his heart for Ling Han, yet he was unwilling to simply give up 2 such pretty, cute little girls. Thus, he said, "They're not your daughters anyways, why don't you just name a price?" A spark of killing intent flashed across Ling Han's expression, and he said, "Old lecher, if you dare say another word, I'll kill you." Chen Yunxiong was about to continue increasing his offer and try to convince Ling Han, but when he saw the killing intent on Ling Han's face, he could not help his heart shuddering. He no longer dared to continue making an issue out of it. He quickly turned the opposite direction and fled. However, he would not give up so easily as he thought. You don't know what's good for you. Then I'll just ask the people of the Earth and Water faction for help and snatch these 2 little girls from you." The old man staggered as he left, instantly causing the other customers in the restaurant to break out into raucous laughter. "Brother, that old guy is a famous lecher, and his main target are little girls. If it was not for the fact that he had always used money to get what he wants, who knows how many times he'd have already been beaten to death," one of the customers who recognized that old lecher said with a shake of his head. Ling Han did not take it too seriously though. The old man was not a martial artist, so his social circle could only include ordinary people. His ability was naturally limited. If Chen Yunxiong had continued to persist, not knowing what was good for him, Ling Han would definitely not have been merciful. Hu Niu was very fast at eating her meat, as if she was afraid that someone would be fighting with her over it. By the time Ling Han and the others had all eaten their fill, she was still eating, and her speed had not slowed one bit. Seeing this scene caused the customers in the restaurant much amazement. They couldn't understand how the tiny stomach of this little girl was able to accommodate so much food. Finally, a bit over 2 o'clock, the little girl finally patted her stomach a few times with satisfaction. She squirmed into Ling Han's embrace, and very soon began to snore. She could eat a lot and sleep a lot. Ling Han stood up to pay the bill. Over 1,000 silver coins had been spent on this one meal. At least 90% of it was in Hu Niu's stomach, proving how much of a spendthrift this little girl was. Thankfully, because Ling Han had killed Hang Zhon, Ma Lang, and the others previously, there was no lack of money in his pocket. The 4 of them exited the restaurant and continued their journey to Huyang Academy. "There are 2 people who've been following us," Liu Yutong said to Ling Han, after they had walked for a while. Ling Han nodded, and said, "I noticed. But I don't know if their target is our money, or us." If their target was them. A ferocious light flashed through his eyes. Without doubt, it was definitely the antics of that old lecher, Chen Yunxiong. If that really was so, then don't blame him for being merciless. "They're coming," Liu Yutong said softly. At the moment, the 2 of them had just walked into a remote little alley, with not one other person around them. This was of course what Ling Han had deliberately done. 2 sturdy men quickly ran towards them. When they reached Ling Han, one of them tried to carry off Ling Zixian, while the other reached out towards Ling Han, intending to snatch away Hu Niu, who was still sleeping in his arms. These 2 sturdy men were not martial artists. They were only a bit stronger than normal people. After all, out of every 10 people, there would only be 1 that possessed a spirit base, so martial artists weren't really that common. Ling Han smiled. He not only did not resist, he even raised his arms a bit, allowing the man to easily snatch Hu Niu away from his hold. The man could not help being stunned for a moment. Such a reaction was something that he had never even considered would happen. Meanwhile, due to the movement, Hu Niu was awakened. She was like a wild beast, and possessed a very alert nature. When she discovered that she was held by an unfamiliar man, a ferocious light immediately shone in her eyes. Chapter 90. Chapter 90. Unwilling to give up his evil intentions. Though Hu Niu had yet to awaken her spirit base, she had already stepped into the 6th layer of body refining tier because of her continuous eating. What kind of concept was that? Ordinary adult men, even if there were 20 or 30 of them working together, could not possibly be able to match her. Discovering that she was in the hold of an unfamiliar man, Hunyo's ferocious nature instantly flared up. Like a tiger waving its paw, her hand connected with the large man's face. The large man's head slanted, and 7 teeth as well as a mouthful of blood was instantly spat out. He immediately fell onto the ground. Hunyo somersaulted in midair and landed steadily in a crouch on the ground. Her mouth opened, revealing 2 canines. Her 4 limbs pushed off the ground at the same time, and like a fierce tiger that had finally escaped its confines, she pounced at the large man. Her hands pressed down on his shoulders, and her mouth was already lowering down in a bite at his throat. Ling Han hurriedly acted and picked up the wild little girl. He definitely did not want this little girl to kill. If she had, then all his and Liu Yutong's efforts would have been wasted. Even so, the large man that had been knocked down to the ground had already paled in fear. His throat released a shrill shriek. If they hadn't seen it or heard it themselves, it was really unbelievable that such a tall, sturdy man would actually be able to release such a sissy sound. The other large man was more fortunate. With a knife hand from Liu Yutong to his neck, he had instantly passed out. "If you scream once more, I'll kill you," Ling Han said. The large man hurriedly covered his mouth with his hands, as if he was a young maiden that had encountered a pervert. Ling Han placed Hunyo back down. The wild little girl's ferocious nature was restrained with much difficulty, and she kept baring her teeth at the large man, giving out a low growl. The large man screamed again due to fear, but when he recalled Ling Han's threat, he hurriedly covered his mouth again. I am a disciple of the Earth and Water faction. If you know what's good for you, you'll let me go immediately," the large man threatened, though he did not look very confident. He was shuddering in fear even as he spoke, his face pale. Ling Han turned to look at Liu Yutong and asked, "What's the background of this Earth and Water faction?" "It's an underground party of the Imperial City. Because some things cannot be done publicly, even the 8 great clans would occasionally make use of the power of this party to do some dirty deeds," Liu Yutong said. She thought for a moment, then continued, "The faction chief of the Earth and Water faction seems to be named Yang Tian Du. He is in the spiritual ocean tier, and mingles very well with the upper-class parties of the Imperial City. In the field of martial arts, the lines between cult, faction, sect, association, and society were very strictly drawn. To be able to possess the name of faction would require a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier as support." Ling Han gave an O and once again looked back at that large man as he said, "I don't care if you're Earth and Water faction or Heaven and Water faction. I ask a question, and you give me an answer. If I'm not pleased with your answer, then I will sever one of your limbs. You can count how many times can you afford my displeasure yourself." The large man's face paled and he hurriedly nodded without stopping. He was not really afraid of Ling Han, rather, he was afraid of Hunyo. This little girl gave him the feeling that she was a fierce tiger, with absolutely no way to reason with her. Who would not be afraid of that? "Chen Yunxiong sent you?" Ling Han asked. Yes. "How many times have you helped him do such deeds?" The large man hesitated for a moment, but when his eyes fell upon Hunyo, he could not help shuddering. He hurriedly answered, "I can't remember exactly how many times, but there should definitely be 10 times. There were actually as many as 10 times. Ling Han gave a humph and struck the large man's chest with his palm. Due to the shock wave from his origin power, he instantly crushed the man's heart. To help a villain commit evil, they deserve more than death. Liu Yutong had already developed a tacit understanding with him. She immediately struck forward with a stab of her sword and killed the man who had fallen unconscious. She then sheathed her sword and said, "Just leave that old fiend to me, I will have people from my clan deal with him." Ling Han considered her words for a moment before nodding in agreement. He knew that Liu Yutong was acting in his best interests. After all, this was the Imperial City, under the direct jurisdiction of the Emperor. Even if it were the 8 great clans, they would have to think twice before doing something. If he killed someone right after he had arrived and this information that could be used against him was acquired by someone who intended him harm, this could possibly result in the thunderous rage of the imperial family. At that moment, not even Zhu Hixin and Zhong Weishan would be able to protect him. Rain Country belonged to the Qi clan, after all. However, as for these two little foot soldiers in front of them, even if they died, there would be no one to pay special attention to this matter. Chen Yunxiong was the boss of a business, so his influence could either be small or large. For Liu clan, as one of the 8 great clans, it'd only be too easy if they intended to deal with a businessman. Moreover, Chen Yunxiong did not have a clean history, so just randomly collecting information on some of his bad deeds would be enough to ruin him completely. Ling Han too had not taken such a minor character seriously, so he naturally would not reject Liu Yutong's kindness. The two of them continued on their journey towards Huyang Academy. The imperial city was extremely big. It was at least 10 times the size of Daeyuan City, and after an hour, Ling Han and the others have finally arrived at the entrance to Huyang Academy. They were immediately halted in their advance. This was not a place that anyone could simply enter. "I am Liu Yutong." Liu Yutong removed a silver plaque and handed it over to the 4 guards who were stationed at the entrance. "So it is true disciple Liu." One of the guards closely examined the plaque and quickly handed it back respectfully. "We did not know it was you, so please forgive us, true disciple Liu." Liu Yutong waved off their apologies. She was currently veiled, so it was only logical that they did not recognize her. She pointed at Ling Han and said, "This is my friend, and he needs to enter the academy for an important matter. Register him for me." Understood, the 4 guards nodded. Huyang Academy had very strict rules. Disciples of the academy were indeed allowed to bring visitors into the grounds of the academy, but the latter were not allowed to stay the night. Upon their entry, they would be registered, and if they had not exited the academy by night, then the disciple who had brought them in would be severely punished. After registering, Liu Yutong took Ling Han to a courtyard. This was where the teacher who was in charge of welcoming new disciples was stationed. Because the new year had just passed, there was a huge group of new students that would be coming to report here. After Liu Yutong had led Ling Han here, she then left with Ling Zixian. The little girl had come here with the place of enrollment that Ling Dongxing had gotten through his deal with the academy, and so would not need to go through the ordinary channels of registration. On the way here, Ling Han had heard about a lot of matters regarding the Huyang Academy from Liu Yutong. Here, students were separated into 3 categories: ordinary disciples, true disciples, and core disciples. Ordinary disciples were simple enough. You'd be considered one from the moment you enter the academy. The true disciples were much less in number, only 30 in total. In terms of cultivation resources, they could gain 10 times the amount of resources available to ordinary disciples, so they were the object of envy for ordinary disciples. There were 2 conditions for becoming a true disciple. Firstly, you'd have to at least be in element gathering tier, and secondly, you'd have to be in the top 30 strongest disciples of the academy. As a result, competition was extremely fierce. However, Ling Han won the first place in this year's Daeyuan tournament, so he would be instantly recognized as a true disciple upon his entry, though this was only valid for 1 year. There were also the champions from 36 other cities who would be able to obtain such a reward, which meant that by the end of the year, 36 people would have to be disqualified, and after that, the true disciples that were ranked from the 21st place to the 30th place would have to face challenges from the 10 strongest ordinary disciples. If they lost, they'd be demoted back to being ordinary disciples. This was also why Qi Yongyi and Jin Wuji had returned to compete for the first place in the Daeyuan tournament. Because even as strong as they were still not true disciples. Chapter 91. Chapter 91, Entering the Academy. However, Liu Yutong was a true disciple. She was not as strong as Qi Yongyi, so why? Because she was the princess of the Liu clan. So, for one, the academy definitely had to give some face to the Liu clan, and for another, at the tournament at the end of the year, she'd still be able to obtain a valuable treasure from her clan to drastically increase her battle prowess for a short time, thus allowing her to easily keep her position as a true disciple. Of course, each great clan could open this kind of back door only once, and guarantee the entry of only one of their clansmen into the academy. All other clansmen could only depend on themselves to fight for their own place in this academy. Above true disciples, there were 3 core disciples. The core disciples were people the Academy would put its full efforts into developing because they were the strongest among the younger generation of Rain Country. They represented the future level of martial arts of the whole of Rain Country, and were the face of the entire nation. To become a core disciple, the prowess of Gushing Spring Tear was necessary. A few hundred years ago, one of the strongest ever core disciples had even reached spiritual ocean tier. However, upon reaching 30 years old, everyone would have to leave the Academy, because 30 years old was considered as the age of maturity, and anyone above this age would be considered a full adult. One of the current core disciples was Chi Feng-yun, the third imperial prince of Rain Country. He was not only extremely talented, he was also someone that the imperial family of Rain Country as well as Huyang Academy had concentrated their efforts on developing, so naturally, he was extremely powerful. He was currently 27 years old, yet had already reached the 7th layer of Gushing Spring Tier. He was the strongest disciple of Huyang Academy, and was also nicknamed as the strongest son of Heaven of Rain Country. The second person was Zhao Huan, who was a member of the Zhao clan, one of the 8 great clans. According to the rumors, when he was born, a strange phenomenon was witnessed. A golden light lit up half the imperial city, and he was almost killed by the secret powers of the imperial family, because he was considered a potential threat to the imperial throne that belonged to the Qi clan. Thankfully, the emperor was a wise man, and he not only did not do anything to harm Zhao Huan, he had even bestowed Zhao Huan with the title of Marquis of the Golden Skyto be granted nobility status upon birth. That was the first time this kind of event happened in the history of Rain Country. And Zhao Huan, after awakening his spirit base, indeed displayed a terrifying talent in the field of martial arts. Currently, Zhao Huan was 23 years old, and he was in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, so in truth, he was not inferior in any way to Chi Feng-yun. The third person was called Kan Yi. He did not have a surname, and according to rumors, he was an orphan. He had been picked up the headmaster of the Huyang Academy from the street, and since he was a child, he had been missing his right arm. In the field of martial arts, losing the right arm was practically a sentence of death, and there would no longer be any future for this kind of person. Yet Kan Yi still managed to become a core disciple, proving how terrifying his natural talent was. Kan Yi, 22 years old, 3rd layer of Gushing Spring Tier. He was also rumored to have battle prowess that could soar up to 7 stars, and was someone that even Zhao Huan would have misgivings about going up against. Interesting. While Ling Han was waiting for the teacher who was responsible for receiving the new students, he kept thinking thus. He did not think too deeply about Chi Feng-yun and Zhao Huan, but this Kan Yi did engender some of his intrigue. Could this Kan Yi also be a genius who possessed a heaven-grade spirit base? Otherwise, how could his advance up the ranks be so swift and he himself so powerful? Hey, are you a new student? The teacher in charge of enrollment finally walked over. He looked at Ling Han a bit oddly, because he had never seen anyone coming to report carrying a little girl. That's right. Ling Han drew out the proof showing that he had exited from Daeyuan City and handed it over to the teacher. The teacher in charge of enrollment was an elite in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. The teacher received it from him, took a look, and could not help showing a surprised expression. He blurted out, "You're Ling Han?" Ling Han scratched his head, and asked, "Am I very well known?" "Ha ha ha ha, you, with the mere prowess of the 4th layer of Element Gathering Tier, managed to defeat an opponent of the 9th layer of Element Gathering Tier, and that opponent happened to be Chi Yongyi, whose battle prowess is not in any way weak. Such talent, TSK, TSK. The headmaster has already said to immediately bring you to see him when you're here to report," the teacher said. Suddenly, he stared blankly and gasped in astonishment, You've already broken through to the 5th layer of Element Gathering Tier." He was at first shocked, but then thought that Ling Han must have long since reached the peak period of the 4th layer of Element Gathering Tier, and after so many days, this guy thus smoothly soared to the 5th layer of Element Gathering Tier. When he thought about it this way, the shock level lessened by quite a large degree. If he found out that Ling Han had only been in the 2nd layer of Body Refining Tier only a few months ago, his jaw would probably drop out of shock. However, because of his exclamation, Hunyo was instantly awakened. She was extremely displeased, and bared her teeth and growled at the teacher, displaying her ferocious nature. "Come, I'll take you to see the headmaster." The teacher beckoned his hand, waving Ling Han forward. Though Ling Han was still very weak now, with time, he may become the strongest core disciple of the academy and show off the might of Rain Country. Ling Han nodded and followed the teacher out, stepping onto a pathway in the academy. Very quickly, they arrived at a cluster of buildings. This was where the high-level officials resided. However, that headmaster had not stayed in his own courtyard, so the teacher in charge of enrollment instructed him to wait for a moment while he himself would go to seek out that headmaster who had gone who knows where. Ling Han waited for a moment, but felt a bit bored, and so began to stroll around in the surrounding area. He suddenly picked up a very familiar smell, and he could not stop his feet from moving towards the source of that smell. It was a very elegant courtyard. The door of the courtyard was ajar, and had not been closed. Ling Han pushed open the door and entered, and very soon saw a young girl sitting cross-legged in the courtyard. Her hand was holding onto a very small alchemy furnace, and her whole right hand was erupting in flames. She was concocting a storm pill. Storm pill allowed a martial artist to increase his speed temporarily, like a storm blowing through. It was a very useful alchemical pill. However, there was something wrong with this smell. Ling Han wrinkled his nose and took a sniff. He instantly understood. One of the complementary drugs was wrong, and though this still allowed the storm pill to be successfully concocted, it would affect the success rate of forming the pill. It would also increase the chances of the furnace exploding. He spoke up, "I advise you to stop immediately. Otherwise, within the time of 3 breaths, your alchemy furnace would definitely explode." The girl completely ignored him. Now was the crucial time of concocting the storm pill, so how could she afford to be distracted? Merely by the second breath, the lid of the furnace was violently flung off, and some bits of junk sprayed out from within the furnace. Although she managed to dodge the majority of it, her face was still covered by a bit of it. The furnace had exploded. The girl finally raised her head to look at Ling Han, surprise filling her eyes. How had this guy known that the furnace would explode? You have to understand, with her level of control, there was absolutely no way that she would have been distracted by any external factors. The scarlet wolf bone is one of the most likely ingredients that would cause a furnace to explode. Especially if it is used in the concoction of storm pill, it would affect the quality of the completed pill. I really don't know what kind of idiot came up with this, Ling Han said, shaking his head. "How dare you insult my master?" The girl was suddenly enraged. With a flash, she had already leaped towards Ling Han. Her right hand formed a palm strike, flames winding around her hand as the heat caused the air around her hand to ripple. 7th layer of element gathering tier. Ling Han had known her cultivation level with a single look, and from the looks of this palm strike, she had not even reached the battle prowess of 7 stars. Actually, this was quite normal. Alchemists would concentrate all their energy on pill concoction and alchemy, so where would they have gotten any spare time to spend on refining their martial arts? This girl's cultivation level of 7th layer of element gathering tier had probably been reached with the aid of alchemical pills, so it was only logical that her actual battle prowess was quite weak. When she stood up, Ling Han had only at this moment realized to his surprise that this girl possessed a very tall, slender figure, and was about the same height as himself. Moreover, she had the charm of a deity, and was overwhelmingly beautiful, not the slightest bit inferior to Liu Yutong in terms of looks. "Hehe, have I spoken wrongly?" Ling Han said as he dodged. Meanwhile, Hunyo was crouching nearby, her face filled with excitement, wanting nothing more to pounce in and take a few bites of her own. Chapter 92. Chapter 92. The Real Storm Pill. The young girl gave a humph. She continued attacking, but said, "The pill formula for this storm pill was a damaged, incomplete one. My master spent a considerable number of years and finally managed to complete the formula. Such a feat was an incredible contribution to the field of alchemy, and you dare to insult my master, so don't you think you deserve a beating?" The storm pill too was lost in the passage of time? Ling Han could not help frowning. What was going on here? Why had so many pill formulae from his time been lost? Reverse pill, storm pill. dark moongrass actually being used to concoct purple origin pill, which was a spine-chillingly wasteful use of the dark moongrass. Logically, after 10,000 years, even if knowledge of alchemy had not improved much, it shouldn't have degraded to such a level, right? He struck fiercely with a palm, forcing the girl away from him. He said with a smile, "If that's true, then your master is indeed quite skilled. However, if I manage to concoct a better quality storm pill, then what are you going to do?" "Impossible. How can you surpass my master?" The girl did not believe him at all. "Just let me give it a try. Worst comes to worst, we'll continue our fight later," Ling Han said. "Fine." The girl agreed. Ling Han grabbed the alchemy furnace that had been dropped on the ground, and said, "Prepare the ingredients for me." He opened his mouth and in one breath recited a list of more than 20 different medicinal ingredients. If it was someone else, they would definitely not be able to remember all the ingredients. But since this young girl was an alchemist, she must definitely have a very powerful memory in this area. Very soon, she went into the room and returned with the ingredients Ling Han needed. Ling Han sat down on the ground. His right hand held onto the alchemy furnace. Hong, and flames instantly appeared upon his hand. The girl's beautiful face revealed a sliver of displeasure. After all, when an alchemist was in the midst of concocting alchemical pills, they all kept up a solemn demeanor, and would usually seat themselves cross-legged on the ground. This was a kind of formality. Yet Ling Han had just simply sat on the ground in such a relaxed fashion. This was absolutely inappropriate. But once she saw that Ling Han had begun the process of pill concoction, she could only force back the admonishment that had come to her mouth. To disturb another whilst he was in the midst of pill concoction was one of the greatest taboos for alchemists, so naturally she would not deliberately violate this rule. She was very much disdainful. One had to understand that although her master did not belong to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, his level of achievement in alchemy was absolutely authentic. He was a black-grade high-level alchemist, and that was the same grade as the highest-ranked official of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion in Rain Country. Her master was currently the headmaster of the alchemy department in Huyang Academy. When there was mention of the name Wu Songlin, what person would not respectfully address him as Grandmaster? Even the imperial family of Rain Country had to give her master a modicum of respect. This brat actually dared to call her master an idiot. If this news was spread out, he'd definitely be beaten to death within 3 steps out of this courtyard. Once Ling Han began the process of pill concoction, his demeanor immediately changed. There was an air similar to the air of a great master circulating around him. His left hand moved very quickly, throwing medicinal ingredients into the furnace one after another. In the meantime, the furnace rotated continuously on his right hand. The flames were sometimes red, sometimes green, and sometimes white, transforming from one to the other color at a very rapid rate, seeming like a blur to any observer. The girl's disdainful expression had rapidly disappeared, and a shocked expression revealed itself on her face instead. Amateurs would only enjoy the show, while experts would enjoy the artfulness. Her name was Li Sai-chan, and she herself was a genius of alchemy, which was why she had been taken as a disciple by Wu Songlin. She was a very conceited person, but when she compared herself to Ling Han, she had to admit that Ling Han's movements were much more experienced and mature than her own. His movements were very natural and relaxed, as if he had been immersed in this field for a few hundred years and had reached the level where he could easily concoct pills even with his eyes closed. Such an achievement, let alone her, even her master was far inferior. How could this be? How could this be? Shouldn't this guy be a profligate young master? How was it that he had such frightening ability in the field of alchemy? Within mere moments, the medicinal ingredients in front of Ling Han had all disappeared, and some sweat had appeared on his forehead. Storm Pill was a yellow-grade mid-level alchemical pill, after all. Furthermore, it was one of the more difficult to concoct types. He was able to concoct it now, but because his cultivation level was a bit too weak, it exerted much of his energy to do so. "Yi, my good disciple, have you finally concocted the storm pill?" At this moment, a voice filled with surprise was heard from the doorway. A small, short old man walked in, all smiles and with a food container held in his hands. There was another old man behind him. The two of them walked in together, and if one paid careful attention, they would be able to discover that there were 3 silver badges hanging on the chests of these 2 men. Black-grade high-level alchemist. In the whole of Rain Country, there were only 2 black-grade high-level alchemists. One of them was the Pavilion Master of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, Fu Yuan Sheng, whereas the other was the headmaster of the Alchemy Department of Huyang Academy, Wu Songlin. And they were these 2 men. Wu Songling saw the girl was standing at one side, and his face was instantly filled with surprise. He had never thought that the person who was in the middle of concocting the pill was not his disciple. Yi. Fu Yuan Sheng also revealed a shocked expression. He knew that Wu Songlin had obtained a very good disciple who had managed to become a yellow-grade mid-level alchemist at the mere age of 18. Moreover, the storm pill was one of the more difficult to concoct pills among yellow-grade mid-level alchemical pills, and now it was actually being concocted by another youngster. Naturally, this was enough to surprise him. It can't be that this old man Wu has gotten another genius of alchemy as a disciple, right? Damn it, why were all the talented people snatched away by him? Hunyo had initially been extremely bored. She had lain down on the ground and had been sleeping, but after Wu Songlin entered, her nose immediately wrinkled, and she bounced up into a crouch. Her eyes fixed upon the food container in his hands, and suddenly, with a low growl, she scuttled forward and pounced towards the food container. Ling Han's right hand rotated continuously. There actually appeared 3 different kinds of flames from between his 5 fingers at the same time: red, green, and white, which suddenly extinguished. 3 Fire Guide. He had invented this in his last life, and this discovery brought upon a revolution in the field of alchemy. It not only would increase the quality of the completed pill, it could even recover a dead pill that could cause the alchemy furnace to explode. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuan Sheng were both flabbergasted. Their eyes were so wide that they were in danger of popping out of their skulls, and their mouths were wide open in shock. From the looks of it, they were extremely astonished and shocked. Meanwhile, Hunyo took advantage of their distraction and snatched Wu Songlin's food container away. She immediately opened it up, and began to enjoy the delicious contents. Could this be the legendary long-lost 3 Fire Guide? To be able to produce 3 different flames at different temperatures, which would improve the effects of the completed pill drastically, it can even recover dead pills. This is the legend of legends, and I've always thought this was only a myth. It should not be the real one, probably just an imitation. The 2 old men said, filled with astonishment. Who? Ling Han exhaled. He tossed the alchemy furnace to Li Sai-chan, and said, "Fortunately, I've not disappointed your expectations. Take a look." Sure, the 2 old men simultaneously snatched at the furnace, as if they were 2 kids fighting over a toy. They were both powerful warriors of spiritual pedestal tier, so their actions were as fast as lightning, and only appeared to be a blur to observers. Li Sai-chan was dumbstruck. These 2 were the most respected and revered alchemists in the whole of Rain Country, and now they were actually behaving like 2 kids. How could she believe what her own eyes were telling her? Finally, the 2 old men desisted at the same time. One of them held onto the furnace, while the other lifted the furnace lid and very carefully drew out a scarlet pill from within. This color, this aroma. There's no mistake, this is the real storm pill. Wu Songlin carved off a small slice, placed it into his mouth, and tasted it. He could not help the increasing degree of surprise and shock on his face, and said, "This is definitely the real storm pill, and moreover, its effects have reached 12 stars, no, 13 stars. What?" Fu Yuan Sheng instantly leaped up in shock. Chapter 93. Chapter 93, Convinced. In the field of alchemy, if the quality of a completed pill reached the standard requirements, it would be graded as 10 stars. If the quality exceeded normal standards, it would be graded as 11 or 12 stars. Normally, the quality would not exceed 12 stars. If the quality of the completed pill was below normal standards, it would be given a grade from 1 to 9 stars, and any pill with less than 1 star would be considered as junk, absolutely unusable. Hiss, even if I were concocting low-grade alchemical pills, my best record was only 12 stars. Fu Yuan Sheng exclaimed in shock. Li Sai-chan's face was filled with absolute disbelief. She could already be considered a genius of alchemy herself, or she would not have been taken in by Wu Songlin as his personally taught disciple. Yet the majority of the completed pills that she has managed to concoct would be 10 stars, barely acceptable. A small portion of her completed pills would be 9 stars or 11 stars. Moreover, the storm pill could be considered to be one of the hardest to concoct pills among yellow-grade mid-level pills. Just take her as an example, she had already practiced concocting the storm pill for a month, yet every time, her efforts would only result in the furnace exploding. You can see how high the difficulty level of concocting this pill was. Such a pill, as long as it was completed, it would be considered a success. Even if it was only graded 3 or 4 stars, this kind of pill would still have a large market of customers willing to buy it. 13 stars, that was the kind of pill over which people would go to war. This guy really had not been bragging. He had really concocted the storm pill, and the quality of the completed pill was even higher than Wu Songlin's own. The storm pills that Wu Songlin himself concocted were only graded at 8 stars, or his record best, 9 stars. Could it be that her master had really made a mistake? Young man. Wu Songlin's eyes were bright and shining. This expression had a close degree of similarity with Hu Niu. In an instant, he had scuttled over to Ling Han, held onto his hand and said, "Were you using the 3 fire guide earlier?" Ling Han nodded. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng both sucked in a breath of cold air. This was something that had been considered a myth among myth. What did a young man that knew how to use the 3 fire guide signify? Young man, accept me as your master, and I can guarantee you will become an earth-grade alchemist at the very least. Wu Songlin said immediately. Hearing these words from him, Fu Yuansheng instantly understood that Ling Han had no relations to Wu Songlin. He quickly squeezed himself into the fray and said, No, take me as your master. I am the pavilion master of Rain Country's Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, and I've got uncountable resources in my hands. You can concoct any pill you like. Nonsense. Old man Fu, you have to understand, this is the territory of my Huyang Academy. Are you trying to snatch my disciples away from me? Wu Songlin was instantly enraged. This young man was obviously a genius of alchemy that could never be encountered within 1,000 years. Just take a look at that storm pill, and you'll know, that's 13 stars. This was practically without precedent. What do you mean by snatching your disciples away from you? You don't even know the name of this young man, and you dare to say he's your disciple? Fu Yuansheng snorted. He turned back round, all smiles again. Young man, what's your name? Li Sai-chan was completely struck dumb with shock. These 2 men were the best alchemists in the whole of Rain Country. Whichever one of them announced they intended to accept disciples, it was absolutely guaranteed that there would be a queue of people all the way from the east gate to the west gate of the imperial city. But now, these 2 men were actually fighting with each other over who gets to accept Ling Han as a disciple, and were even about to come to blows over the matter. How could this not astonish her? Moreover, she was even a little jealous. I am Ling Han said. I am one of the new students that is entering Huyang Academy this year. Did you hear that? This is a disciple of my department. Wu Songlin said proudly, and waved his hand a few times at Fu Yuansheng. I don't have the time to share a drink with you today, so you'd best hurry back to your Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. So what if he's a student of your Huyang Academy? That doesn't conflict with him accepting me as his master. Fu Yuansheng was completely indifferent, and continued to say to Ling Han, Young man, what do you say? This is my disciple, old man Fu. Are you going to fight with me over him? Wu Songlin said in a thunderous rage. For such a disciple, I'm definitely willing to fight. Fu Yuansheng said, not to be outdone. You're going to ignore our friendship of so many years. Pei, you're the one who's so insistent on fighting with me. Neither of the 2 old men was intending to back down, and from the looks of it, they were moments away from fighting with each other. Master, the both of you can accept him as your joint disciple. Li Sai-chan interrupted. That's right. The 2 old men paused at the same time. Why hadn't they thought of such a simple solution? The 2 of them turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, I think that the both of you might not be able to teach me anything. This, what arrogance. Li Sai-chan's small mouth was wide open in shock. Who were Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng? They were the two strongest alchemists in Rain Country. And they couldn't teach him anything? Even though you've managed to concoct a storm pill worth 13 stars, the storm pill is only a yellow-grade mid-level pill after all. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng both looked displeased. This young man was a genius, but he was really too arrogant. Such a person may possibly shine for a moment, but definitely would not achieve too much. Ling Han smiled and said, "The two of you, we can discuss our theories with each other and learn from one another." Saying such words was really him being extremely modest and humble. As someone who had once been the alchemy emperor, putting aside that these two men were only black-grade high-level alchemists, even earth-grade high-level alchemists were only qualified to stand quietly and listen respectfully to his words in front of him. Yet Wu Songlin and Fu Yuansheng did not know that, so the displeasure on their faces deepened even further. Ling Han pretended he had not seen anything, and casually began to speak. Most of what he said was only common knowledge of alchemy. Though his cultivation level had decreased by much, and there was no way he was able to concoct high-grade alchemical pills, but if you were talking about theoretical knowledge, who would be able to match him? The two alchemists had been initially indifferent, but then they gradually became serious. Occasionally, they would offer their own opinions, but as the discussion continued, they had transformed into the learning side, and continued to ask Ling Han about some difficult problems they had encountered in alchemy. Li Sai-chan watched all this happen from the side. She had long been shocked to numbness. This young man was obviously even younger than herself, yet how was it that he had such shocking understanding and comprehension in the field of alchemy? If one did not see his appearance and did not hear his voice, anyone would think that this was an elderly alchemist. She too possessed a terrifying talent in the field of alchemy, which was why she had been accepted by Wu Songlin as his personal disciple. Moreover, she was also extremely beautiful, and together with Liu Yutong, the both of them were called the twin pearls of the imperial city. The number of people who were interested in pursuing and wooing her would be enough to form a queue that could encircle the imperial city. But when you compared the two of them, she was practically like an alchemist's apprentice that had not even yet been formally taught. As she listened, the admiration she felt for Ling Han grew even stronger. She could not help sighing. There were indeed geniuses in this world. If that was not true, how was it possible that someone at such a young age had already surpassed her master? Indeed, there is no age restriction for learning. Whoever has the ability deserves to be called a teacher. Fu Yuansheng was the first to exhale. I had initially thought that young friend was too arrogant and proud, yet never thought that the one who was too arrogant and proud was myself. Young friend's level of comprehension in alchemy has already far surpassed the both of us, and in future, you'd definitely be able to become an earth-grade alchemist, or even a heaven-grade alchemist. After I've heard these words from you, I feel as if the grand door to earth-grade alchemy has opened for me, and once I manage to fully comprehend your views, I'd definitely be able to advance into the ranks of earth-grey. Wu Songlin sighed as well. He stood, bowed for a long while to Ling Han, and said, "Many thanks, young friend." "Many thanks, young friend." Fu Yuansheng had also stood, and bowed towards Ling Han. Li Sai-chan was completely numb with shock. Because of the unique status accorded to alchemists, these two men could be considered as possessing the highest status, and were only below the emperor in rank. Yet now, they actually both bowed to a youngster. This was a special treatment that not even the emperor of Rain Country could enjoy. If this news spread out, probably no one would believe it, right? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.